Chapter 2560. The masked man. The white-haired old man forced himself to calm down after being blocked by the level 9 formation. Soon after, he shouted, "We're all on the same boat now. If we want to leave, we have to kill this person. Otherwise, we'll all die. If you want to live, follow this old man and kill this person." Following the white-haired old man's order, the experts from the other palaces who were in a state of chaos calmed down and gathered around the white-haired old man. "Be careful." Although Lian Meng was shocked by the masked man's strength, she was worried that the masked man would not be able to withstand the combined forces of over 90 experts. "Sir, we won't make things difficult for you. Besides, we've always minded our own business. There's no need for us to fight to the death. How about this? Open the grade 9 array and let us go. We won't pursue your previous rude behavior." Jing Hai was surrounded by several experts from the 9 Firmaments Palace. Her beautiful eyes stared at the masked man before her. The white-haired old man cursed Jing Hai in his heart for acting recklessly. He slapped Jing Hai to the ground and cupped his hands towards the masked man. "Sir, we have no intention of offending you. As long as you let us go, we're willing to pay the corresponding reward." Jing Hai glared at the white-haired old man. Just as she was about to speak, she choked on the surging killing intent of the white-haired old man. The half-step Void Sky 9th stage expert from the 9 Firmaments Palace had already been killed by the masked man. With her strength, she did not dare to provoke the white-haired old man. Otherwise, even if the white-haired old man killed her, no one would stand up for her. The masked man silently looked at all of this and sneered, "Did you take my words for granted? I said all of you stay here." The white-haired old man's face immediately darkened. He said malevolently, "Since that's the case, then die. We have so many people. Are you afraid we can't kill you?" After saying that, the white-haired old man waved his right hand. Terrifying divine power poured out and turned into a huge divine power hand that crushed towards the masked man. "Attack together. Kill him." The moment the white-haired old man attacked, the other experts followed suit. Many of them rushed towards the masked man with bloodshot eyes. They knew that this was the only way to survive. Only by killing this masked man could they be saved. The moment these experts rushed out, the white-haired old man fell behind and only attacked from afar. After witnessing the masked man easily kill off the purple-clad woman from Purple Cloud Palace and the middle-aged man from 9 Firmaments Palace, who were on the same level as him, the gray-haired old man was extremely fearful of the masked man. Naturally, he did not dare to take the lead and throw his life away. The masked man sneered. He suddenly swung his sword, and immediately, large swathes of space collapsed. Terrifying spatial cracks with distinct layers appeared. It was an extremely terrifying sight. Some of the experts who were at the front immediately exploded into clouds of blood mist the moment they fell into the spatial rift. They died without a complete corpse. However, there were too many experts rushing over in an instant. After the experts at the front were killed, the experts at the back immediately rushed out of the spatial collapse and arrived in front of the masked man. The masked man was neither hurried nor slow. With a flick of his finger, he took out a huge jade seal from his spirit ring. Immediately, he took it out, transforming it into a huge mountain that blocked in front of him. Bang, bang, bang. The power of the huge jade seal was much more terrifying than the sword chi. No matter how many experts rushed over, they were all blocked by the jade seal. Moreover, because the surface of the jade seal exuded an extremely terrifying Taoist rhyme power, the experts who were blocked by the jade seal were all smashed into pieces under the attack of the Taoist rhyme power. In less than 10 breaths, nearly half of the 90-odd experts were killed by the powerful Taoist rhyme power on the surface of the jade seal. As for the remaining cultivators, they were all terrified and hurriedly moved away from the terrifying jade seal. Unfortunately, the moment these cultivators retreated, the jade seal expanded again. It was as if it covered the sky and the sun. It was so fast that these cultivators did not even have time to react. Miserable shrieks rang out one after another. The remaining 40 or so cultivators were no match for this terrifying Imperial Jade Seal. The moment they touched the Imperial Jade Seal, they all exploded into clouds of blood mist. Before long, the remaining cultivators were all exterminated. Only 3 figures were left in the huge level 9 great array. They stared blankly at everything that had happened. These 3 people were Lan Ji, the gray-haired old man, and the 9th Heaven Hall's Jing Hai. Die for me! The masked man put away the phagocytosis and grabbed at the void with his right hand. A giant hand made of divine power that covered the sky grabbed at the gray-haired old man. The gray-haired old man roared and 2 black wheels appeared in his hands. Then he flung them out. The black wheels instantly alternated and transformed into countless wheel phantoms. The phantoms were densely packed and enveloped the masked man's figure. This was the gray-haired old man's strongest attack. The old man had once used this move to kill a half-step void sky 9th step expert. Rumble. Unfortunately, the gray-haired old man's strongest attack only lasted for a moment before it was torn apart by an even more terrifying energy. It was like a torn piece of cloth. Then, a terrifying sword chi that carried with it the will of death swept out. Under the gray-haired old man's incredulous gaze, the sword chi shot out from between his eyebrows. A bloody wound appeared between the white-haired elder's eyebrows. The wound continued to spread until it covered the entire body of the white-haired elder. With a poochie sound, the white-haired elder's entire body was split into 2. Blood splattered everywhere. When the gray-haired old man was killed, Jing Hai and Lan Ji trembled. They looked at the masked man in fear, not daring to move at all. 3 half-step void sky 9th step experts and more than 90 void sky 7th step and 8th step experts working together were easily killed by this person. Even if the 2 of them were pigs, they knew that this mysterious masked man was a powerful void sky 9th step expert. He was in existence on the same level as their hall master. Sir, we didn't provoke you. I hope you can be merciful. Lan Ji hurriedly begged for mercy. Jing Hai was quite stubborn. Although her beautiful eyes were filled with fear, she didn't beg for mercy. The masked man grabbed Jing Hai with his right hand and threw her in front of Lian Meng. He said indifferently, "I'll leave this woman to you." Lian Meng's beautiful eyes looked at the masked man's back with a complicated expression. However, she didn't look at Jing Hai. Instead, she asked, "Do we know each other?" The masked man didn't answer. Instead, he held Lan Ji and left the planet. Jing Hai's strength was much weaker than Lian Meng's. Coupled with the fact that she was seriously injured, Jing Hai naturally couldn't escape from Lian Meng's palm. Chapter 2561. The Divine Medicine's Whereabouts, Impossible. No matter how talented he is, it's impossible for him to become so strong in such a short time. Lian Meng shook her head. Soon after, her beautiful eyes coldly looked at Jing Hai before her as a strand of killing intent burst forth. Jing Hai shuddered and hurriedly said, "Lian Meng, I didn't betray you on purpose. The hall master and the others forced me. This has nothing to do with me." Lian Meng sighed softly, "Senior sister Jing Hai, I've always treated you as my best sister and there's nothing I can hide from you. However, you betrayed me and even tried to kill me." Just as Jing Hai was about to say something, Lian Meng waved her hand, sending out a powerful wave of God force into the space between Jing Hai's eyebrows. Jing Hai glared at Lian Meng with hatred in his eyes before collapsing to the ground, dead. After killing Jing Hai, Lian Meng's beautiful eyes looked towards boundless Taishu and muttered, "Master once said that if he went into seclusion for 100 years, something might have happened to him. If that's the case, I must go to boundless Taishu to find the 5-spirit cloud space fruit." As she spoke, Lian Meng took out an ordinary bronze mirror from her bosom. This bronze mirror flickered with a 5-colored light spot. Every time this 5-colored light spot flickered, it would shoot out a 5-colored ray of light that swept towards the depths of the boundless Taishu. Clearly, the direction of this 5-colored ray of light should be the place where the 5-spirit cloud space fruit was located, as Lian Meng had mentioned. After putting away the bronze mirror, Lian Meng rushed towards the direction the 5-colored light beam was pointing at an extremely fast speed. On a barren meteorite in the periphery of boundless Taishu, a figure stopped on the meteorite while holding a miserable figure. "My lord," the masked man casually threw Lan Ji to the side and curled up, looking at the masked man in fear. "Do you still recognize me?" The masked man took off his mask and looked coldly at Lan Ji with a pair of sharp eyes. "It's you?" Lan Ji immediately recognized the white-clothed youth in front of him. Wasn't this the Zhuowen who had defeated him in the Long River Galaxy? Back then, he had always thought that the white-robed young man in front of him was a half-step void domain 9th stage cultivator. Therefore, after Zhuowen let him go, he planned to tell the Hall Master about this matter and hoped that the Hall Master would help. However, before he could tell the Hall Master about the Zhu Rong worm and Zhuowen, he met the masked Zhuowen again and was captured again. This made Lan Ji feel bitter, and he secretly cursed his bad luck. At the same time, Lan Ji also knew that the white-clothed youth in front of him was a supreme master of the Void Sky 9 steps. He was no match for a nobody like him. You really don't change. Now let me ask you, who else knows about the goo worm besides you? Zhuowen's murderous gaze locked onto Lan Ji as he asked coldly. Lan Ji trembled and quickly said, "Spare me, Your Excellency. I haven't told Lan Ran about this matter yet. I'm the only one who knows. As long as Your Excellency spares this lowly one's life, I won't divulge it." Zhuowen nodded and immediately said in a deep voice, "You said that the changes in Boundless Taishu were all caused by this goo worm. Is this true?" Lan Ji hesitated and said, "This lowly one obtained this goo worm fragment by accident. When the changes happened in Boundless Taishu, this lowly one happened to be in Boundless Taishu. Relying on the reaction of the goo worm fragment, I saw a burning bug. This bug triggered a reaction from my goo worm fragment. Because of this lowly one is sure that the burning bug should be the main body of this goo worm. This thing is definitely something extraordinary. Therefore, this lowly one tried every means to obtain this goo worm fragment." At this point, Lan Ji quickly added, "Your Excellency, you may not know what that burning bug is. Basically, no one in Huaxia knows. Even this lowly one only knows that it should be a type of goo worm. Moreover, it's much stronger than ordinary goo worms. However, the main body of this goo worm is extremely cunning. It's like a fish in water in Boundless Taishu and has hidden itself very well. If Sage Beiwu hadn't been killed back then, it might not have attracted the attention of the 100 halls of the Taiching Immortal Realm." Zhuowen nodded. It seemed that the changes in Boundless Taishu were mainly caused by the main body of the Zhurong goo worm. The 100 halls are searching for the goo worm in Boundless Taishu in addition to sealing it? Zhuowen asked. Moreover, those who can enter the 100 halls are basically Void Sky 7 steps and above. Otherwise, they won't be able to enter even if they have a quota, Lan Ji quickly said. Zhuowen nodded and asked in a seemingly unconcerned manner, "Why do you want to capture Lian Meng? If I remember correctly, Lian Meng should be a disciple of the Taiching Immortal Realm, right? Aren't you afraid that the Taiching Immortal Realm will question you if you dare to capture the disciple of the Sky Domain Master?" Lan Ji had a strange look in his eyes and said, "Sir, you don't know about this, right? The Taiching Immortal Realm, Shanqing Immortal Realm, and Yuqing Immortal Realm supremacy went into seclusion hundreds of years ago and haven't come out until now. Most importantly, the Sky Domain origin, purple chi comes from the east, has collapsed. This caused a sensation for a time. It's because of this that the Sky Domain origin has a problem. Therefore, the 100 halls of the Taiching Immortal Realm think that something might have happened to the three supremacies. Because Miss Lian Meng has an innate immortal physique, her body contains supreme Tao runes that can help people comprehend the heavenly Tao and make it easier to prove one's Tao. Therefore, the hall masters all invited Miss Lian Meng. Yun sneered in his heart. He knew that the 100 halls of the 100 halls definitely didn't capture Lian Meng for a simple reason. There must be something shameful going on, but Lan Ji didn't know about it. Thinking of this, Yun waved his sleeve and forced an imprint into Lan Ji's soul. Lan Ji smiled bitterly. He was naturally familiar with this imprint. It was a slave imprint. Back in the Long River Galaxy, Yun had planted it in his soul once. Because of his good performance, Yun had removed the slave imprint. Now that he had repeated the same mistake, Lan Ji secretly cursed his bad luck. He actually met this fiend, Zhuowen, twice. Stay by my side during this time. If you perform well, I will remove the slave imprint for you, Zhuowen said faintly. Lan Ji sighed softly, and a flattering smile suddenly appeared on his face. Now take me to the entrance of the boundless Taishu. I need to enter the boundless Taishu, Zhuan said coldly. Lan Ji hurriedly nodded and bowed, leading the way. The entrance to the boundless Taishu was actually a smooth rock wall. Because the rock wall was too smooth, it was like a mirror that reflected the figures inside. The entrance was heavily guarded, with teams of cultivator armies patrolling the surroundings. As long as someone tried to enter the entrance, they would immediately be stopped by the guards and interrogated. Do you know the whereabouts of the Great Void Bone Refining Ginseng, Great Essence Double Dragon Lingji, and 8 trigrams Divining Yang Water? Chapter 2562. Lan ran Hall. On the way to the entrance, Yuan had only casually mentioned the purpose of his trip to Boundless Taishu. He didn't expect Lan Ji to know the whereabouts of the 3 level 9 divine herbs. However, this casual mention had given him such a pleasant surprise. This was really beyond Zhuowen's expectations. Lan Ji respectfully said, "This little one has seen Temple Master looking for the Great Void Bone Refining Ginseng and the Great Essence Double Dragon Spirit Grass. As for the 8 trigrams Divination Yang Water, this little one doesn't know." Yuan narrowed his eyes and nodded. "In that case, do you know where the Hall Master of Lan Ran Hall is now? It can't be in Wuji Taishu, right?" Lan Ji shook his head. "That goo worm is hidden too deeply in Boundless Taishu. It's also very cunning. The Hall Masters of the various halls can't enter Boundless Taishu to search for it personally. However, I believe that the Hall Masters of the various halls will take action once there is news of the goo worm." In other words, the Hall Master of Lan Ran Hall is still in Lan Ran Hall of the Tai Ching Immortal Realm? Zhuan asked in surprise. Yes, the Tai Ching Immortal Realm is connected to Boundless Taishu by an ancient teleportation array. My lord, you can return to the Tai Ching Immortal Realm very quickly, Lan Ji said respectfully. Zhuowen nodded and decided to return to the Lanqi Hall of the Tai Ching Immortal Realm first. Although he knew that the Great Elemental Double Dragon Lingji, Great Void Bone Refining Ginseng, and 8 trigrams Divining Yang Water were all in the Boundless Taishu, the Boundless Taishu was too big. It was obviously very difficult for him to find these 3 level 9 divine herbs in such a large area. However, if there were clues to the 3 divine herbs, Zhuan would naturally be able to obtain them easily with his current strength. This would save him a lot of time. The Tai Ching Immortal Realm was surrounded by clouds and mist. It was vast and resembled a paradise on earth. However, there was a rumor that was spreading like wildfire in the Tai Ching Immortal Realm. All the forces in the Tai Ching Immortal Realm knew that the 100 Halls were fighting over Lian Meng, the chief disciple of the Dao Virtue Hall. Moreover, many factions knew that at least 20 of the 100 Palace Halls had received news of Lian Meng's whereabouts and secretly sent people to capture Lian Meng. This news was originally very secretive, but it was later said that nearly 100 experts sent out by these 20 or so palaces had all fallen. Moreover, they were killed by a mysterious masked man whose name was unknown. He didn't know what kind of rumor it was, but such secret news had actually spread out, and it was spreading more and more enthusiastically throughout the entire Grand Clarity Immortal Realm. Many cultivators in the Grand Pure Immortal Realm were angry at the shamelessness of the 20-plus palaces. They actually sent people to capture Honorable Grand Pure's disciple Lian Meng. Of course, even more cultivators were extremely interested in the mysterious masked man. Many people even guessed that the masked man was probably a backup left behind by Honorable Tai Ching. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to save Lian Meng so coincidentally. Among the 20-plus palaces, the 9 Firmaments Palace, Azuran Palace, and Purple Cloud Palace suffered the greatest losses. Not only did these 3 palaces lose several experts of the Void Sky 8th step, but they also lost a half-step Void Sky 9th step expert. Half-step Void Sky 9th step cultivators were geniuses with the greatest hope of advancing to the Life Enlightenment realm. Such geniuses were the focus of cultivation in any faction, and they were the upper echelons of their respective factions. Losing a half-step Void Sky 9th step expert was already a great loss for Azuran Palace, Purple Cloud Palace, and 9 Firmaments Palace. In the main hall of Azuran Palace, Palace Master Lan Zun frowned. He looked at the communication jade talisman in his hand for a long time in silence. In the end, he crushed the communication jade talisman and coldly snorted, "Investigate this masked man for me. Since he dared to kill my Azuran Palace's people, he must pay the price." A figure hidden in a dark corner of the hall bowed towards Lan Xun from afar, then turned into a shadow and disappeared through the door. However, the moment the shadow disappeared through the door, it immediately flew back at an extremely fast speed, as if it had been blasted back by a terrifying force. Rumble! This shadow smashed into the steps below Lan Xun's feet, almost turning the steps into dust. Blood gushed out like a fountain, and the shadow's body twitched. His breathing was weak, and it was obvious that he wouldn't survive. Lan Xun didn't need to look to know that his subordinates Void Sky Bridge and Divine Soul had been destroyed. Being able to survive with one last breath was already very strong. Who is it? Lan Xun narrowed his eyes and coldly looked at the entrance of the hall. For better or for worse, Eisenhall was heavily guarded and even had a powerful Tier 9 Grand Array. Yet, someone had managed to sneak in without him noticing. Dang dang dang. A white-clothed youth slowly walked over. Through the white light at the entrance, his handsome face was revealed. Then, he raised his head and indifferently looked at Lan Xun, who was standing on the steps. "Are you the palace master of Azuran Palace?" The white-clothed youth asked indifferently. Lan Xun's face was gloomy as he said, "I'll ask you again, who are you? Didn't you send this person to investigate me? Why are you asking me who I am in the blink of an eye?" Zhuowen spoke indifferently. Lan Xun was stunned, and then he said gloomily, "So it's you. You've killed many experts of my Azuran Palace, yet you still dare to come here? You're courting death. I've come to ask for something. So long as you hand it over, I'll immediately leave Azuran Palace, and I won't attack you." Zhuowen spoke calmly. Lan Xun sneered at Zhuowen and said, "Do you really think you're invincible? You're actually so arrogant before me. You're the first and you'll be the last." With that, Lan Xun took a step forward. His clothes fluttered, and a terrifying gale formed around him. It whistled through the air like a cannonball. Rumble! With just a single step, Lan Xun had arrived before Zhuowen as if he'd teleported. After that, Lan Xun's right fist seemed to travel through space, and it instantly struck Zhuowen's chest when he arrived before Zhuowen. Rumble! The sound of countless explosions rang out and directly rushed into Zhuowen's body. Waves of mysterious life force mercilessly erupted from Lan Xun's fist. Bang, bang, bang. In an instant, the surrounding space distorted, and the huge main hall of Eisen Temple collapsed with a loud rumble. Outside the main palace, Lan Ji looked at the ruins of the main palace with fear in his eyes. What's going on? The main hall has been destroyed. Did someone invade? Let's go and take a look. I wonder how the palace master is doing? The palace master is powerful, so he's naturally fine. But I wonder who was so daring to attack the main hall. They're courting death. Inside Azuran Palace, many cultivators gathered around the main hall. Soon, several thousand people surrounded the main hall. Lan Ji quietly retreated. Because his status in Azuran Palace wasn't low, these cultivators respectfully saluted him and asked him what had happened. Chapter 2563. Lan Xun. Everyone's gaze gathered on the miserable figure, and they all sucked in a breath of cold air. Because the miserable figure that flew out of the main hall was no stranger to them. In fact, they were very familiar with him. It was their hall master, Lan Xun. Lan Ji looked at the miserable Lan Xun with fear and awe. He knew that the mysterious white-robed youth, Long One, must be the one who put Lan Xun in such a sorry state. Zhuowen slowly stepped forward. He looked indifferently at Lan Xun, who was standing in the distance, and said indifferently, "I heard that you know the whereabouts of the Great Essence Double Dragon Ganoderma and the Great Void Bone Refining Ginseng. I won't make things difficult for you. Tell me the whereabouts of these 2 level 9 divine medicines. Otherwise, I might turn your Azurian Hall upside down today." Many cultivators of Azurian Hall glared at him. They couldn't remain calm. "Who do you think you are? You want to turn my Azurian Hall upside down? You don't know the meaning of death." I don't know what method you used to successfully sneak attack Lord Lan Xun. Do you think you're so great? Today, you've entered Azurian Hall. You won't be able to leave. You'll stay here forever. Zhuan completely ignored the voices of the cultivators of Azurian Hall. He calmly looked at Lan Xun. He knew that Lan Xun should be sensible and hand over the whereabouts of the 2 level 9 divine herbs. Although the Great Void Bone Refining Ginseng and the Great Dual Dragon Ganoderma were precious, in Zhuan's opinion, Lan Xun wouldn't choose to fight him head-on after seeing his strength. After all, it wasn't worth it to fight him to the death for 2 level 9 divine herbs. Unfortunately, Lan Xun might not care about the 2 level 9 divine herbs, but he cared about his face. Under the eyes of countless cultivators from Eisen Hall, he was sent flying by a nobody and even destroyed the main hall. This was a great humiliation for him. How could he be willing to let it go like this? He even had to hand over the whereabouts of the Great Void Bone Refining Ginseng and the Grand Essence Twin Dragon Ganoderma. Furthermore, Lan Xun had just obtained these 2 level 9 divine herbs and was planning to head to the Boundless Taishu to find the whereabouts of these 2 divine herbs. How could he obediently hand them over to Zhuan? Do you think my Eisen Hall has no one? Exalt Lan's eyes were gloomy as he stomped his right foot. Immediately, dazzling streaks of white light shot up from the ground, like a meteor shower shooting into the sky from the depths of Azuran Hall. In an instant, an extremely terrifying barrier appeared in the space around Eisen Hall. The energy erupting from the barrier contained soul-stirring power. Palace Protection Array? Why did the Palace Master activate the Palace Protecting Grand Array? This Palace Protecting Array is a level 9 array formation. It only activates when Eisen Hall is in a life or death crisis. Why did Palace Master activate it from the start? The moment the Palace Protecting Array appeared, the surrounding cultivators were shocked. Many of them looked at Exalt Lan in confusion. They clearly felt that Exalt Lan was making a mountain out of a molehill. But Exalt Lan didn't think so. He was well aware that the white-clothed youth in front of him had an ordinary aura, but he knew that the youth's body contained terrifying power. Moreover, Exalt Lan knew that the white-clothed youth in front of him had the same cultivation as him. They were both in the life-comprehending realm. As a life-comprehending realm cultivator, Exalt Lan was well aware of how terrifying the life-comprehending realm's profound life-divine force was. It also possessed endless vitality. It was very difficult for a life-comprehending realm cultivator to kill him. At most, it was possible to defeat him. However, the white-clothed youth in front of him had thoroughly angered Exalt Lan, so Exalt Lan wanted to kill him. He also knew that if he wanted to kill the white-clothed youth, he would have to activate the Palace Protecting Array. Otherwise, it wouldn't be so easy for him to kill the white-clothed youth with his strength alone. I'm afraid this person is also a life-comprehending realm expert. Otherwise, Palace Master wouldn't activate the Palace Protecting Array and treat him with such caution. The cultivators of Eisen Hall reacted and looked at the white-clothed youth in fear. They weren't fools. They saw Exalt Lan fly out of the main hall and destroy it. They didn't think too much about it because of their anger, but now that they thought about it carefully, they realized that the white-clothed youth must be an expert on the same level as Exalt Lan. Even if he's in the life-comprehending realm, he'll undoubtedly die if he fights Palace Master under the Palace Protecting Array. That goes without saying. This person is extremely stupid. He thinks he's in the life-comprehending realm and dares to attack Eisen Hall alone. This is no different from suicide. Many cultivators sneered. They wanted to see how their Palace Master would kill the white-clothed youth. In their opinion, the white-clothed youth was tired of living for daring to provoke Eisen Hall. In the crowd, Lan Ji's face was pale. When Zhuan forced his way into Eisen Hall, he felt something was wrong and told Zhuan his concerns. Unfortunately, Zhuan didn't listen to his advice and insisted on breaking into Eisen Hall. Now, Exalt Lan immediately activated the Palace Protecting Array. Even if the white-clothed youth was heaven-defying, he was only on par with Exalt Lan. With the Palace Protecting Array, Lan Ji didn't believe the white-clothed youth could beat Exalt Lan. After activating the Great Palace Protection Array, Lan Venerable placed his hands behind his back and looked down at Zhuan with confidence. I have clues about the Grand Essence Double Dragon Ganoderma and the Great Void Bone Refining Ginseng. I was just about to head to the Boundless Taishu to search for them, but you took the initiative to deliver yourself to me. It seems like I have to get rid of you before I can go. At this point, Reverend Lon glanced at Lon Ji in the crowd and continued, besides the people from Eisenhall, no one else knows about this. Since you aren't from Eisenhall, it means that a spy from Eisenhall betrayed this reverend and brought you here. Lon Ji trembled. He knew Exaltland's words meant something. Lon Ji subconsciously wanted to retreat, but he found that the other two half-step Void Sky ninth step experts from Eisenhall were blocking his retreat. They were coldly staring at him. Lon Ji's heart sank. He knew Exalt Lon must have exposed him. Otherwise, these two half-step Void Sky ninth step experts wouldn't block his path so coincidentally. Lon Ji even noticed that many cultivators from Eisenhall were looking at him with disdain and disdain. Lon Ji sighed inwardly. His eyes were filled with despair. He knew he was finished this time. Chapter 2564. Palace Protecting Array. It's all Long Wen's fault. He should have listened to me earlier and sneaked into Eisenhall. Now, he's about to be killed by Lon Zun. I'm afraid I won't be able to escape this calamity either. Lon Ji stood in a daze, grumbling inwardly about Zhuowen's stupidity. Zhuowen watched all of this in silence. He didn't even stop Lon Zun from activating the level 9 array. Instead, he looked at Eisenhall's level 9 array with interest. If he guessed correctly, this level 9 array should be drawing energy from the depths of Eisenhall. It would break out of the ground in an instant and form an extremely complicated array prison like a meteor shower. Moreover, Yun could clearly feel an extremely heavy pressure rising from the array. It was as if countless mountains were pressing down on his shoulders the moment the array was activated. Moreover, this pressure wasn't static. As time passed, it became more and more terrifying and heavy, like a heavy downpour. Zhuowen's physical body was extremely strong, especially after soaking in the true dragon's blood. His body wasn't much weaker than the devouring clans. Although the array's suppression was strong, it was no different from scratching an itch in Zhuowen's eyes. Moreover, Yun was a genuine level 9 array master. A mere level 9 array of Eisenhall was nothing to him. If he wanted to break this array, he wouldn't need much time. Is this all you've got? Zhuowen put his hands behind his back and slowly walked towards Lon Zun. A trace of emotion rose in his heart. Not long ago, when facing a life comprehension realm expert, he was actually so calm and composed, the pearl of wisdom within his grasp, and he didn't even place a life comprehension realm expert in his eyes. This wasn't because Yun was arrogant, but because he stood at a higher level. After all, it wasn't the first time he had killed a life comprehending realm expert. He had even killed several life-comprehending realm experts from the Black Smoke clan. At this moment, the only ones who could truly threaten Zhuowen were half-step Heavenly Dao Lords and Dao-confirming realm experts. Sure enough, as soon as Zhuowen spoke, Lon Zun's face sank, and he said coldly, "How arrogant! That's enough to kill you." As he spoke, Lon Zun took a step forward, arched his waist, and shot out like a cannonball. His right fist shot out along with his body. When Lon Zun punched out, countless strands of white light shot out from the formation. They all shot towards Zhuowen as Lon Zun punched out. For a moment, Zhuowen was completely surrounded by white light. There was nowhere to hide. In front of Zhuowen, Lon Zun's right fist was covered in a blazing white light. His aura was like a dragon as he aimed for Zhuowen's chest. Zhuowen sneered. He reached out with his right hand and made a grabbing motion. Suddenly, purple energy gathered in his palm. Then, Yun took a step forward and slashed out with his purple sword. In an instant, the purple energy swept out and transformed into a purple mist that covered the sky. After that, a pitter-patter of purple rain fell from the mist. Every single droplet of purple rain contained terrifying destructive force. The destructive force seemed capable of obliterating the heavens and the earth. It was extremely terrifying. The purple droplets sprayed out in all directions and actually obliterated the countless strands of white light in the surroundings. On the other hand, Yun clenched his right fist, and the sword in his palm suddenly changed as it slashed towards Lon Zun. After that, Countless strands of purple rain converged on the sword and transformed into a strand of purple sword energy that shot into the sky. The strand of sword energy was crescent-shaped, and it was over 10 kilometers wide. Violet energy flowed on its surface, and it was suffused with a mysterious glow. The strand of sword energy was extremely swift, and it instantly arrived before Lan Xun. At that moment, Lan Xun had just punched out. He was imagining Zhuowen dying under his punch, but the strand of sword energy had already broken through the formation's attack and arrived before him. Because the strand of sword energy was too fast, Lan Xun's fist was too fast. When the two collided, even Lan Xun couldn't change his direction. He could only punch the strand of sword energy. Although Lan Xun was surprised by how terrifying Zhuowen's attack was, he was extremely confident in his punch. He was certain that it could break through the strand of sword energy. Rumble! When Lan Xun's fist collided with the strand of sword energy, his expression changed. Fear filled his eyes. A thunderous sound rang out continuously. Then, Lan Xun let out a miserable shriek and was sent flying again. He crashed into the other sub-palaces around Eisenhall and turned them into ruins. At that moment, all the spectating cultivators of Eisenhall were dumbfounded. They watched all of this in disbelief. Under their stupefied gazes, the level 9 formation formed by countless strands of light began to crack. Then, with a crack, it shattered into countless pieces. How can he be so strong? Is he really in the life enlightenment realm? After a moment of shock, the cultivators of Eisenhall were horrified. Defeating Lan Xun with a single strike and breaking through a level 9 formation? This person was too strong. It was impossible for him to be in the life enlightenment realm. It was very likely that he was in the death enlightenment realm, or even the life and death dual extremities realm. When their gazes finally landed on Lan Xun, who was struggling to get up from the rubble, they all gasped. Lan Xun's right fist and right shoulder had been blasted into a bloody mess. It was a tragic sight. Lan Xun was at the life enlightenment realm. His mysterious life divine power had extremely powerful healing abilities. However, even though the mysterious life divine power in Lan Xun's body continuously enveloped his right arm, the wound on his right arm was recovering at a snail's pace. Dao intent? You're from Dao Palace? Or you? How come I've never seen you before? Lan Xun asked in a shrill voice as he clutched his bloody right arm, looking at the young man in white who was surrounded by purple rain and holding a purple sword in his hand. You don't have the right to know. Zhuowen's indifferent voice sounded. With the purple sword in his hand, he shot towards Lan Xun as if he was teleporting. Lan Xun screamed and hurriedly said, "Wait! Didn't you come to Eisenhall for clues about the Great Essence Double Dragon Ganoderma and Great Void Bone Refining Ginseng? I'll give them to you if you let me live." Zhuowen completely ignored Lan Xun's screams and said indifferently, "I can still get them from you after killing you. Since you've forced me to attack, I'll finish what I started." Lan Xun roared and took out a blue halberd from his spirit ring with his remaining left hand. He swung the halberd toward Zhuowen. The sky changed color as the halberd swept out. Unfortunately, even though Lan Xun had used all his strength, it was no different from a chicken or a dog in Zhuowen's eyes. Chapter 2565. Entering Limitless Taishu the moment he killed Lan Xun, Yun took Lan Xun's spirit ring and rummaged through it with his powerful spiritual consciousness. He immediately found a sheepskin map. The sheepskin map was soft and smooth to the touch. The moment Zhuowen took it out, he knew that it wasn't ordinary. Moreover, he casually used his divine power to scratch the edge of the map. He found that his divine power couldn't scratch the edge of the map, which showed how tough this sheepskin map was. The reason Zhuowen had noticed the sheepskin map was naturally not because of its toughness, but because the route on the sheepskin map was exactly the same as the one in the Boundless Taishu. Moreover, there were 2 light spots marked on the map, and the annotations of these light spots under the map turned out to be the Great Void Bone Refining Ginseng and the Grand Essence Double Dragon Ganoderma, the 2 grade 9 spirit medicines. The 2 light spots were very close to each other and they were in the same place. This place was called the Death Sacrifice Cave. From Lan Xun's annotations, the Death Sacrifice Cave was extremely dangerous. Even Lan Xun had a lingering fear of the death sacrifice cave. After putting away the sheepskin map, Yuan slowly landed on the ground. He looked indifferently at the other cultivators of Eisenhall and said indifferently, "Is there anyone else who wants to avenge your hall master?" Wherever Zhuowen's gaze passed, everyone's eyes drooped. They didn't dare to look at Yuan. On the other hand, Lan Ji walked out of the crowd with a face full of joy. He came to Zhuowen's side with a flattering smile on his face. He didn't expect Zhuowen to be so strong. Lan Xun, who had activated the Great Defensive Array, was defeated by this person with a single sword strike. Moreover, he wasn't unfamiliar with the Dao intent Zhuowen used. It was the Dao intent unique to the Dao intent hall. Clearly, even if this person wasn't from the Dao intent hall, he was probably related to it. Thinking of this, Lan Ji recalled why Zhuowen had saved Lian Meng. It was because Zhuowen was related to the Hall of Virtue. That was why he had saved Lian Meng. "Lan Ji, let's go." Seeing that the other cultivators of Eisenhall didn't dare to look at him, Yuan knew that it was useless to stay here. He didn't have any deep enmity with Eisenhall. Moreover, he only came here to find clues about the Grand Essence Double Dragon Ganoderma and Grand Void Bone Refining Ginseng. Lan Xun was too arrogant and didn't take Zhuowen seriously at all. He even activated the palace's protective formation to try and keep Zhuowen here. That was why Zhuowen was forced to kill him. If Lan Xun had some self-awareness and handed over the whereabouts of the Grand Essence Double Dragon Ganoderma and Grand Void Bone Refining Ginseng, Yuan might have used other things to trade with him. Unfortunately, Lan Xun attacked Zhuowen as soon as he saw him. Moreover, he attacked to kill. If Yuan didn't fight back, he would be a fool. As for the others in Eisenhall, they had no enmity with him. Naturally, Yuan wouldn't do something like killing someone's entire family unless it was a deep hatred. "Yes, wherever my lord goes, I will follow." Lan Ji quickly smiled flatteringly. After seeing Zhuowen's strength, Lan Ji made up his mind to follow this white-robed youth. Zhuowen nodded and didn't care about Lan Ji's change in attitude. With a wave of his sleeve, he disappeared from Eisenhall, leaving behind a group of Eisenhall cultivators looking at each other and sighing. In the following period of time, news of Eisenhall's Hall Master Lan Xun's death swept through the Immortal Realm. All the forces in the Immortal Realm secretly investigated the white-robed youth who killed Lan Xun. However, there were too few clues about the white-clothed young man. The only clue was that the white-clothed young man had utilized Dao Insight during the battle with Lan Xun, and it caused the other powers to link the white-clothed young man to the Virtue Hall. Some people even connected the white-robed youth who killed Lan Xun with the masked man who was in the limelight. They found that the two were likely the same person. The matter of the white-robed youth and Eisenhall caused a great uproar in the Immortal Realm. As the main character, Yuan used the teleportation array to leave the Immortal Realm and return to the periphery of Wuji Taishu. When he arrived at the periphery of Wuji Taishu, he received a message from the communication Jade Talisman. It was from Purple Star Sovereign. After Zhuowen replied to the message, he stood there and waited. Not long after, Purple Star Sovereign rushed over from another direction and finally stopped in front of Zhun. "Brother Zhuo, where did you go? You've been gone for so long without any news. If I hadn't sent you a message, would you have forgotten about me?" Crepe Myrtle Star Monarch asked. Zhuan touched his nose a little awkwardly. As Purple Star Sovereign said, he had been busy thinking about the Grand Plainness Twin Dragon Ganoderma and Great Void Bone Refining Ginseng. He had forgotten that Purple Star Sovereign was waiting for him. "Who is this?" Purple Star Sovereign asked in surprise when his gaze fell on Lan Ji, who was beside Zhuan. Lan Ji hurriedly bowed and said, "Lan Ji greets you, sir. I am Lord Long's servant. May I know your name? You've only been out for a short while and you've already taken in a servant. You can call me Purple Star." Purple Star Sovereign nodded. Lan Ji hurriedly called out to Lord Crepe Myrtle. His expression and actions were filled with respect. "It's a long story. Let's not talk about it." Zhuan shook his head. Purple Star Sovereign saw that Zhuan had no intention of talking about it and did not ask further. "Lan Ji, stay in the periphery of Wuji Taishu and help me keep an eye out for the 8 trigrams yang water. If you can find any information about the 8 trigrams yang water, you will be rewarded handsomely," Zhuowen said to Lan Ji. Lan Ji's eyes lit up when he heard this. He hurriedly cupped his hands and patted his chest to guarantee that he would do it well. After exhorting Lan Ji a few more times, Zhuowen and Purple Star Sovereign entered the entrance of Wuji Taishu. Since both of them had a quota, they were able to enter the boundless Taishu after a brief inspection by the guards. This is Wuji Taishu? When Zhuowen opened his eyes again, he looked at the empty space around him and frowned slightly. Crepe Myrtle Star Sovereign also opened his eyes. His gaze was grave and solemn. What they saw was an endless void and countless ruins that would never change. These ruins could be seen everywhere. Some were the ruins of palaces, some were the ruins of beautiful gardens, and some were the ruins of the vicissitudes of life. There were all kinds of ruins that were dazzling. Zhuowen's spiritual sense was extremely vast. When his spiritual sense continued to spread out, he discovered that there were all kinds of ruins. As Zhuowen went deeper into the depths of boundless Taishu, he realized that there was no end to boundless Taishu at all. There was only an infinitely large space. Zhuowen's gaze became extremely solemn. Wuji Taishu was completely different from the other dangerous places he had been to. Chapter 2566. Death Sacrifice Cave. Brother Crepe Myrtle, the two of us have different objectives for entering the boundless Taishu. Let's part ways here. If anything happens, just use the communication jade talisman to inform me, Zhuowen said to Crepe Myrtle Star Lord. Crepe Myrtle Star Lord nodded and left the place without saying anything. Crepe Myrtle Star Lord knew very well that his objective for entering the boundless Taishu was the burning bug, while Zhuowen's objective was the great simplicity double dragon Lingji mushroom and the great void bone refining ginseng, the two level 9 divine medicines. Their objectives were completely different. If they left together, it would undoubtedly delay both of them. Splitting up was naturally the best and most effective way. After Crepe Myrtle Star Lord left, Zhuowen took out the sheepskin map and compared it with his current location. He quickly determined the direction of the Death Sacrifice Cave and summoned the space-time wheel, turning into a stream of light. Ever since the boundless Taishu had been sealed off by the 100 halls of the Taiching Immortal Realm, the boundless Taishu had seemed extremely deserted. Zhuowen rarely encountered many cultivators along the way. Even if he did, the cultivators he encountered were not weak. Clearly, they were considered experts in the Huaxia heavenly region. However, the cultivators he encountered also knew that the cultivators who could enter the boundless Taishu were not to be trifled with. After exchanging glances with each other, they left on their own. There were basically no fights or collisions. On the way to the Cave of Death Sacrifice, Zhuowen stopped at a few ruins along the way. The reason why he stopped was because his senses of the soul had scanned the ruins and found treasures or divine medicines that he was interested in. However, Zhuowen discovered that the main ruins in the ruins were not the giant star beasts, but the powerful restriction traps left in the boundless Taishu. Almost every ruin he passed by had a powerful restriction array formation. Zhuowen even discovered many level 9 restriction array formations. It was just that these level 9 restrictions were too old, and they were all damaged. Therefore, their power was greatly reduced, and they did not affect Zhuowen too much. Moreover, even if they were complete level 9 restriction arrays, Zhuowen would not be afraid. After all, he was a level 9 array Dao Divine Master. Along the way, Zhuowen obtained many good things and precious divine medicines. Unfortunately, he did not find the Great Simplicity Double Dragon Lingji Mushroom or the Great Void Bone Refining Ginseng. Zhuowen also knew that these two level 9 divine medicines could not be found in these ordinary ruins. They could only be found in the famous Death Sacrifice Cave. Hence, Zhuowen did not stay any longer after finding a couple of ruins along the way. Instead, he rushed towards the Death Sacrifice Cave. About 5 days later, Zhuowen arrived at the periphery of the Death Sacrifice Cave. The cave was as big as an ordinary cave, and it was dark inside. Unlike ordinary caves, this cave appeared in the starry sky, but it was also different from a black hole. This cave was not as big as a black hole, and it did not have the terrifying suction force of a black hole. However, Zhuowen felt a suffocating aura of death in the darkness of the cave. This aura of death was too strong. It was definitely the first time Zhuowen had felt such a strong aura of death. Is this the death sacrifice cave? What a terrifying place. Zhuowen's eyes were solemn. The moment his consciousness entered the death sacrifice cave, the connection was immediately severed. Clearly, the death sacrifice cave had a power that could sever consciousness. Coupled with the terrifying power of death, Zhuowen's divine sense made him extremely wary and dignified. This aura of death reminded Zhuowen of the death chi that covered the king's sword. The death chi's aura was very similar to this aura of death. However, the aura of death in the death sacrifice cave was much stronger than the one on the king's sword. Zhuowen involuntarily took out the king's sword and stepped into the cave of death sacrifice. Bush, bush. Gusts of wind of death whistled past Zhuowen's ears. The sound of the wind was like the wailing of ghosts and howling of wolves from the depths of hell. It was extremely terrifying. Even before Zhuowen's eyes, the wind of death that was gushing toward him transformed into many ferocious ghost faces that pounced toward Zhuowen as if they wanted to take his life. If an ordinary person were to hear the terrifying sound of the wind, coupled with the countless ferocious faces in front of them, they would definitely be scared out of their wits. Unfortunately, Zhuowen was no ordinary person. Zhuowen fiercely slashed out with the emperor sword in his right hand, and the countless ghost faces in front of him were instantly shattered and scattered, turning into countless black dots that disappeared without a trace. Moreover, Zhuowen also discovered that after those ghost faces were chopped into pieces, the death chi was absorbed by the king's sword. The king's sword had been nourished by the death chi for many years. In fact, it had completely integrated with the death chi, becoming a sword of death. When I advanced to the life enlightenment realm, I used the everlasting ice lotus to break through. The everlasting ice lotus also became the mysterious life lotus on the 9th step of the illusory heavenly bridge. Although I'm still a distance away from the death enlightenment realm, the death chi in the death sacrifice cave is too suitable for me to comprehend the mysterious death divine power. If I can comprehend the mysterious death divine power through the death chi here, I'm afraid I can smoothly advance to the death enlightenment realm. Zhuowen thought that his next realm was the death enlightenment realm. He needed an environment rich in death chi like this to break through. He didn't expect to find it now. However, Zhuowen also knew that the death sacrifice cave was very famous in Wuji Taishu. It was very dangerous. If he wanted to cultivate here, he had to find a safe place. But if he wanted to find a safe place in this place, he naturally needed to know enough about it. Moreover, Zhuowen also wanted to find the Grand Essence Double Dragon Ganoderma and the Void Bone Refining Ginseng, the 2 grade 9 spirit herbs. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. The moment Zhuowen completely entered the death sacrifice cave, the sound of air breaking suddenly swept toward Zhuowen, aiming at all the vital points on Zhuowen's body. Zhuowen snorted coldly. He instantly slashed out dozens of times with the king's sword in his hand, sealing off every corner of his body and blocking all the attacks that were aimed at his vital points. At the same time, Zhuowen summoned the phagocytosis. It expanded to several hundred feet and floated above his head. Waves of energy fell like rain and scattered around his body, forming a black energy defense. Bang bang bang. The moment Zhuowen summoned the phagocytosis defense, the surface of the phagocytosis defense once again emitted continuous crackling sounds. Obviously, after Zhuowen blocked the first wave of attacks, there was another wave of attacks behind. Fortunately, although the attacks were concentrated, they weren't very powerful. The phagocytosis basically blocked them all. With the existence of the king's sword, no matter how many distorted figures there were, they could not stop Zhuowen in the slightest. Although Zhuowen wanted to continuously kill the distorted figures here to cultivate the death energy in the king's sword, he also knew that his main purpose in entering the death sacrifice cave was not to cultivate the king's sword, but to cultivate the Great Void Bone Refining Ginseng and the Grand Essence Double Dragon Ganoderma. Right now, his first priority was to get his hands on these 2 level 9 divine herbs. As he continued to go deeper, the number of distorted figures did not increase as Zhuowen imagined. On the contrary, they became fewer and fewer. This made Zhuowen surprised. According to the usual practice, shouldn't there be more obstructions the deeper he went? Why was it the opposite in this death sacrifice cave? However, Zhuowen did not relax his vigilance. He knew that sometimes The quieter a place was, the more terrifying it was. When all the distorted figures disappeared, Zhuowen arrived on top of a black reef. This black reef was extremely huge, like a deserted island. In front of the black reef was a huge black sea. This black sea stretched across the starry sky of the death sacrifice cave as if it had appeared out of thin air. There was no container to carry it. However, Zhuowen could sense that the aura of death contained within this black sea was much, much stronger than before. This was the true sea of death. As Zhuowen was thinking about how to cross this death sea, the shadow of a sailboat slowly appeared at the end of the sea. The moment Zhuowen saw the true appearance of the ship, his eyes immediately fell silent. This was because the ship was actually formed from the bones of a giant beast. The pole standing in the middle of the ship was a huge rib, and the sail at the top was actually human skin. The bone ship stopped at the shore of the black reef. It was silent, as if it was waiting for someone to board it. Zhuowen frowned. He felt that this bone ship was too strange. However, he also knew that if he wanted to cross this black sea, he had to rely on this bone ship. When he entered the black reef, Zhuowen planned to use the time wheel to cross the Black Sea directly. However, he was disappointed to find that the Black Sea was set up with countless restrictions. This forbidden flight restriction was extremely powerful. In Zhuowen's opinion, it actually surpassed a level 9 array formation. Clearly, this forbidden flight restriction was definitely a level 9 array formation or above. Zhuowen didn't know exactly what level it was. This death sacrifice cave is really mysterious. It actually has such a mysterious forbidden space restriction. From the looks of it, this forbidden space restriction seems to be naturally formed. Zhuowen praised the restriction in the sky above the Black Sea in amazement. He had already landed on the deck of the bone ship. However, the moment he landed on the deck, Zhuowen held the king sword in his hand. Phagocytosis hung above his head. At the same time, he used the Thunderfire sword and the Blood Immortal sword to surround him. Xiao Hei's shadow appeared on the hilt of the Thunderfire sword. She rubbed her arms like a human and said, "Kid, what is this place? Why is it so gloomy? It makes me uncomfortable." Zhuowen briefly introduced this place. Xiao Hei and the Blood Immortal then understood that Zhuowen had entered the death sacrifice cave in the infinite Taishu. As soon as Zhuowen finished speaking, the bone ship trembled slightly. Then, it moved away from the black reef on its own and headed towards the depths of the Black Sea. Damn, is this a ghost ship? There's no one here, but it can move on its own. How strange. Xiao Hei muttered to herself carefully. With Xiao Hei's consciousness, she had already scanned the bone ship thoroughly after coming out. Naturally, she found that there was no one on the bone ship. Zhuowen frowned and said, "Follow me into the cabin. Maybe you'll find something?" With that, Zhuowen walked towards the open door of the cabin. The bone ship had a total of 3 levels. Zhuowen had already scanned it with his divine senses. Of the 3 levels of the ship, the first level was a resting area similar to a hall. The second level was filled with rooms, which should be the passenger cabins. The third level was a dining hall with a kitchen inside. What surprised Zhuowen was that the 3 floors of the cabin were not only complete, but also extremely clean and tidy. It did not look like a ghost ship that was covered in dust. Chapter 2568. Strange Illusion. Xiao Hei looked around and said in surprise, "Look at the cleanliness of this hall. It looks like it was just cleaned yesterday. But there's not even a ghost in this cabin. How could someone clean it? Let's go down and take a look." Zhuowen's brows furrowed even tighter. Arriving at the second floor, Zhuowen walked down the corridor and opened the doors of each room. Unsurprisingly, the beds in each room were very clean and tidy. The blankets were rolled up and folded. It looked like they were just cleaned yesterday. After not finding much on the second floor, Zhuowen went straight to the third floor. The dining room on the third floor was also extremely clean and tidy. There was even a rice jar in the kitchen that was half filled with white rice. There was also some rice on the rice ladle. It was as if someone had just cooked and the rice ladle was the extra rice that had just been added. Heavens! So much blood. Where is this place? Suddenly, a slightly nervous voice sounded in Zhuowen's mind. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed and he quickly took out an alchemy furnace. A turtle appeared at the bottom of the alchemy furnace. Its black head stretched out and looked at the rice jar in front of it nervously. Blood? Where is the blood? Zhuan followed the alchemy emperor turtle's gaze and fell on the rice jar. Other than the rice ladle, there was only white rice in the rice jar. There was so much blood in the alchemy emperor turtle's mouth. The alchemy emperor turtle looked at Zhuan in astonishment and said, "Are you blind? The jar is full of bloody foam. On top of the bloody foam, there is a bloody hand bone." Zhuan's eyes narrowed and he looked at the rice jar again. As if thinking of something, he immediately took out 81 beast bone array discs and began to deduce. Bang! When Zhuan finally finished his deduction, ripples of array formation began to appear around him. Then, Zhuan's face turned ugly as he discovered that the rice jar in the kitchen was not filled with rice, but with minced meat. The rice ladle in the rice jar was not a real rice ladle. It was indeed a hand bone that the pill emperor turtle had mentioned. The hand bone was stained with blood and looked exceptionally bloody. Not only that, but the entire kitchen was filled with the smell of blood. The pot on the kitchen stove was not filled with delicious soup or dishes. Instead, it was filled with thick blood and broken limbs. The chopping board was stained with blood, and the sharp blade was mottled with blood. The surroundings of the kitchen were covered in blood. Not only that, but the dining room was the same. There was a human skull on the dining table, and there were countless maggots growing in the 2 holes in the skull. Zhuan went up to the 2nd floor and found that every room was covered in blood, and the neat quilt on the bed was not a real quilt, but a complete human skeleton neatly folded there. When he reached the 1st floor, he found that the hall was in a mess. From time to time, he would find many corpses, and there was much more blood than the 2 floors below. Blood flowed under his feet like a blood-colored stream. I didn't expect this bone ship to have such a powerful illusion array. I didn't even notice it at first. Zhuan muttered in a low voice, but his heart sank. If the pill emperor turtle hadn't warned him, he might have really thought that this was just an unmanned ship and would have relaxed his vigilance. Since such a powerful illusion array was arranged in this bone ship, it naturally wasn't formed naturally. It was most likely artificially arranged, and the master who arranged this illusion array was probably hiding in some corner, secretly spying on him. Although Zhuan didn't know the true purpose of the master who arranged this illusion array, Zhuan knew that this master's goal was definitely not pure. "I must find this guy." Zhuan coldly snorted, and his powerful spiritual energy swept through the entire bone ship without hesitation, not letting go of any corner. But to Zhuan's disappointment, he didn't find the slightest clue. Was there really no other creature on this bone ship? Zhuan thought to himself, and once again used his spiritual energy to sweep through the cabin several times, but the results were just barely satisfactory. Unsurprisingly, he didn't find anything. Zhuan calmed down and said to himself, "It seems that I thought too much. The person who left this illusion array on this bone ship should have already left. Otherwise, it would be impossible for me to not find anything." Zhuan shrugged, and his whole body completely relaxed. After casually clearing out a seat, he leisurely sat down and put away the phagocytosis and the king sword. Even the pill emperor turtle, the blood immortal sword, and the thunder fire sword were put away. At this moment, Zhuan really seemed to be defenseless. The moment Zhuan's whole body was completely relaxed, a sharp whistling sound came from below, and then a large black shadow appeared in a radius of 10 feet under Zhuan's feet. The black shadow became denser and denser, and then a huge black mouth suddenly stretched out from the black shadow. Its thick black upper and lower jaws were like scissors, completely enveloping Zhuan's body. The upper and lower jaws of the black mouth suddenly closed, and then Zhuan's figure was completely swallowed by the big mouth. Hee. The moment the big mouth swallowed, it actually emitted an extremely human-like eerie laughter. Unfortunately, this laughter didn't last long, and was covered by a cold voice. "Soul kill." This cold and indifferent voice had just sounded when a painful howl was emitted from the large black mouth. Immediately, the large black mouth suddenly scattered into countless black shadows that fled towards the depths of the cabin. The moment the black mouth collapsed, a white-clothed youth appeared in the hall, safe and sound. "Where do you think you're going?" Zhuan sneered, and with a stomp of his right foot he immediately rushed to the bottom of the cabin. His speed was extremely fast, and in an instant he reached the bottom of the cabin and landed in the dining room on the 3rd floor below the cabin. Looking around, Yuan found that the dining room was no different from the original one. Then his gaze fell on the rice jar in the kitchen, and the corner of his mouth revealed a smile. Soul kill! Zhuowen's powerful consciousness turned into a big hand, quickly swept out, and violently smashed the rice jar. Then the black shadow hidden in the rice jar screamed again, and wanted to escape again. Unfortunately, how could Zhuowen allow this black figure to succeed? The large divine consciousness hand was already prepared and suddenly changed direction, grabbing the black figure in his hand. However, the black shadow's strength was not bad. The moment it was caught by Zhuowen's consciousness hand, it released a terrifying mental shock wave. This mental shock wave was too huge, like a monstrous tsunami, and was about to crush Zhuowen's consciousness and even the depths of his spirit. Unfortunately, Zhuowen's spirit was so strong that it was even above the two extremes of life and death. Although the black shadow's mental shock wave was powerful, Yuan was still somewhat affected, but not by much. Soul kill. Chapter 2569. Great Void Bone Refining Ginseng. The power of the soul kill was extremely powerful, and the black shadow was torn to pieces. However, the moment the black shadow was torn to pieces, it immediately condensed and then fled in another direction at an extremely fast speed. Zhuowen realized that the black shadow was extremely afraid of divine sense attacks, so he repeatedly used his divine sense to form a large hand and reach towards the black shadow, tearing it to pieces again. Although the black shadow was fast, under the lock of Zhuowen's divine sense, it had nowhere to hide. Every time it fled to a different place, it was immediately crushed to pieces by his thunderous means. After the black shadow was crushed to pieces for the 10th time, the black shadow's shrill voice gradually weakened. It no longer fled, as if it knew that it could not escape, and actually rushed toward Zhuowen. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes, and an extremely rich golden light erupted from between his eyebrows. With a swoosh, it rushed out and directly pierced through the black shadow. The black shadow screamed and directly fell to the ground, twitching non-stop, and its breath was weak. Zhuowen's gaze fell on the black shadow, and only then did he realize that the black shadow's body was very similar to the distorted human figure when he first entered the death sacrifice cave. However, the black shadow in front of him was more solid than the distorted human figure, and it was shorter. Its figure was closer to a monkey than a human. At this time, the strange black shadow was twitching non-stop on the ground. In order to prevent the black shadow from escaping again, Zhuowen's powerful divine sense turned into a cage, trapping the black shadow. It seems that the illusion on the bone ship was caused by this thing. Xiao He appeared not far away with the thunder fire sword, silently looking at the trapped black shadow, and said in a dignified voice, "The death aura on this thing's body is denser than the distorted human figure that came in at the beginning. I'm afraid it's a native creature of the death sacrifice cave. As for the human flesh on the bone ship, I'm afraid it's the bones of the cultivators who died on the bone ship before," Zhuowen said lightly. "What are you going to do with this thing?" Xiao He asked. "Kill it." As Zhuowen spoke, he took out the Emperor's sword and pierced through the black shadow. The black shadow screamed and dissipated into black smoke. After destroying the shadow, Zhuowen returned to the deck. His gaze pierced through the heavy fog, looking at the opposite shore where the bone ship had sailed. He could vaguely see a huge island in the distance. He had a feeling that the Grand Essence Double Dragon Spirit Grass and the Grand Void Bone Refining Ginseng, these 2 Tier 9 spirit herbs, should be on that island. Whoosh, whoosh. The sound of waves suddenly rang out. Zhuowen discovered that there were other bone ships approaching the bone ship. More than 30 bone ships converged towards Zhuowen's ship, vaguely surrounding Zhuowen's ship. Rumble! A bone ship suddenly stopped in front of Zhuowen's ship. The entire ship shook violently and then stopped. Zhuowen furrowed his brows and looked at the more than 30 bone ships that had gathered around him. He saw many black shadows in these bone ships and couldn't help but sneer. "It seems like you're here for revenge. Since you're all here, don't think of leaving." Zhuowen sneered. The space between his eyebrows glowed with a dazzling golden light. A terrifying divine sense suddenly burst out, turning into more than 30 golden rays that pierced through the gloomy sky and swept towards the surrounding bone ships. After knowing that these black shadows were afraid of his divine sense, Yuan naturally attacked without any scruples. His divine sense was far more powerful than that of the two extremes of life and death. It had already begun to take shape and was transforming into a heavenly Tao Master. Although it was still not as powerful as a heavenly Tao Master, perhaps even a half-step heavenly Tao Master's divine sense might not be stronger and more solid than Zhuan's. Zhuan didn't use his full strength when dealing with the Black Shadow before, but now that he was surrounded by more than 30 bone ships, he naturally used his full strength. A series of sharp screams rang out as all the shadows that were pierced by Zhuo Wen's divine sense sword light began to scramble around in pain, their voices filled with agony. Zhuo Wen, on the other hand, was like a ghost as he leapt towards the bone ship in front of him. Using his divine sense, he probed the black shadow inside the bone ship. Taking a step forward, the Emperor's sword in his hand mercilessly stabbed forward. The black shadow was pierced by the King's sword, and all the death energy in its body was absorbed by the King's sword. The moment he killed the black shadow, Yuan stepped out, left the bone ship, and rushed towards another bone ship. His divine sense was like a big net, firmly catching all the black shadows in the other bone ships. Zhuan stabbed with his sword, and each sword took the life of a black shadow. After killing the last black shadow, Yuan looked tired and withdrew his divine sense net, returning to his bone ship. Although Zhuo Wen's divine sense was powerful enough, releasing it so unscrupulously was still quite taxing for Zhuan. However, Zhuan found that after killing more than 30 black shadows, the death energy in the King's sword had obviously increased by a lot. Obviously, the death energy in these black shadows was of great help to the King's sword. After cleaning up these black shadows, Zhuan blasted away the bone ship in front of him, and the bone ship under his feet automatically set sail, heading towards the hazy island ahead. After a while, the bone ship docked at the edge of the island, and Zhuan was able to see the full picture of the island. The island wasn't big, and it was pitch black, with a hazy black fog lingering on it. Zhuan could feel that the death energy on this island was much stronger than the previous places. It could definitely be called the Island of Death. The moment Zhuan stepped onto the Island of Death, he felt an extremely terrifying death energy. It was like countless tentacles, grabbing at him. However, Zhuan summoned the everlasting ice lotus, blocking all of the death energy outside. Ha! Zhuo Wen suddenly let out a soft cry of surprise. The moment he entered the island, he spread out his divine sense and scanned the entire island. He discovered countless distorted human figures at the center of the island. Above the soil in the center of these distorted human figures, there was a ginseng nearly a foot long growing. This ginseng was extremely strange. Its whole body was white, like the color of human bones. Great Void Bone Refining Ginseng. The moment his divine sense discovered this ginseng, Yuan recognized it as the Great Void Bone Refining Ginseng. However, Yuan didn't rush over, but carefully and slowly approached the center of the island. The Great Void Bone Refining Ginseng was surrounded by distorted human figures, and these distorted human figures were much more strange and terrifying than the distorted human figures that had just entered the Death Sacrifice Cave. Hundreds of meters away from the Great Void Bone Refining Ginseng, Yuan could barely see the distorted human figures in the center of the island with his naked eyes. He could only vaguely see the Great Void Bone Refining Ginseng growing in the crevices of the stone through the gaps between the human figures. There were only 9 distorted human figures surrounding the Great Void Bone Refining Ginseng, but these 9 distorted human figures were much larger than ordinary distorted human figures. They were at least 5 feet tall. Xiao He, help me lead these distorted human figures away. Chapter 2570. Grand Essence Double Dragon Ganoderma. The distorted figures that were enraged by the Thunder Fire energy focused all their attention on the Thunder Fire Sword. When they saw the Thunder Fire Sword running away after releasing the Thunder Fire energy, 8 of the 9 distorted figures rushed out and chased after the Thunder Fire Sword. Although the Thunder Fire Sword's strength was not particularly strong, Zhuan knew that the Thunder Fire Sword's speed was absolutely terrifying. Even if he ran with the Thunder Fire Sword at full speed, he might not be able to catch up. Therefore, Zhuan was not very worried that Xiao He would have an accident. At this moment, Zhuan's gaze fell on the distorted figure that had not left. This distorted figure was taller than the other 8 distorted figures. It was 6 feet tall, and the surging death energy in its body was as terrifying as a storm. When Zhuan appeared in front of the distorted figure coldly sized up Zhuan with its pitch-black pupils. Under Zhuan's solemn gaze, the 6-meter-tall figure attacked without uttering a single word. Bang! Zhuan raised the King Sword and used the last move of the Destruction Dao sword art, the Big Bang technique. The surrounding space shattered like glass, and countless cracks appeared and shattered. However, to Zhuan's surprise, the 6-foot figure was extremely powerful. The 6-foot-tall human figure merely threw a punch, and the deathly aura stirred up a vortex that blasted forward. The shattered space was annihilated by the deathly aura energy. The 6-foot figure's right foot stomped, and its momentum did not decrease. It raised its right fist and continued to attack Zhuan. The death energy rushed toward him like a soul-reaping death god. Zhuan's gaze was solemn. He knew that the 6-foot figure's strength was not ordinary. He raised the King's Sword and slashed out a terrifying sword light. Bang! 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 In just an instant, Zhuan and the 6-foot figure bombarded each other. Zhuan became more and more shocked as the battle went on. He did not expect the 6-foot figure guarding the Great Void Bone-Refining Ginseng to be so powerful. He was using the King's Sword, which could restrain the death energy, but he only had the upper hand. We have to end this quickly. Zhuan's eyes narrowed, and a purple mist suddenly erupted around him. His figure became even more hazy within the purple mist, and his speed, under the enhancement of the purple mist, reached the extreme. At this instant, Zhuan utilized the 8th level Dao insight, causing him to be like a fish in water within the violet mist. In only the time of a single breath, he'd changed a few hundred positions, and every time he changed a position, he'd slashed out a few hundred times, causing him to instantly slash out a few hundred times. Basically, every single sword strike was boosted by the 8th level Dao insight, causing its might to increase by 8 times. The purple mist dissipated, and the 6-meter-tall figure was cut into countless black qi. This black qi was death qi, and it was completely devoured by Zhuan's King's Sword. It's a good thing that Xiao He lured away the other 8 distorted figures. Otherwise, I'm afraid I'd be in for a tough battle. Zhuan muttered in a low voice as a smile appeared on his face. Walking forward, Zhuan pulled out the Great Void Bone-Refining Ginseng, carefully took out a jade box, and placed the Great Void Bone-Refining Ginseng in the jade box. After putting away the Great Void Bone-Refining Ginseng, Zhuan's gaze fell on the front of the island, where there was a pitch-black arch bridge that led to the depths of the hazy black mist on the other side of the island. He knew that it should be the deepest part of the Death Sacrifice Cave, and it was most likely to contain the Grand Essence Twin Dragon Ganoderma. Kid, help me. These 8 damn things are actually good at combining techniques. If you don't come over, this Dragon Lord will be finished. While Zhuan was looking at the depths of the Death Sacrifice Cave and was deep in thought, Xiao He's voice rang out in his mind. Zhuan didn't think too much and immediately rushed towards the direction where Xiao He had called for help. After finding Xiao He, he found that Xiao He was besieged by 8 distorted figures and was in imminent danger. Zhuan didn't hesitate to rush in and slashed out with the Emperor's sword. Rays of sword light burst out like a waterfall. What made Zhuan afraid was that each of these 8 distorted figures was much weaker than the 6-meter-tall figure, but when the 8 of them joined forces, their strength far surpassed the 6-meter-tall figure. In the end, Zhuan was forced to use his 9th level Dao intent to barely break the combination technique of the 8 distorted figures and kill them one by one. After eliminating these 8 distorted figures, Zhuan couldn't help but rejoice at his decision to let Xiao He lure these distorted figures away from the beginning. He knew that if the 8 distorted figures were to be added to the 6-meter-tall figure, their strength would definitely reach a whole new level. If Zhuan wanted to deal with the 9 distorted figures, he would have to use his space-time god art as a trump card. You got the Great Void Bone-Refining Ginseng? Xiao He asked. Yes, Let's go deeper into the Death Sacrifice Cave to take a look. According to the map we got from Reverend Lon, the Great Void Double Dragon Ganoderma is also in the Death Sacrifice Cave. I think it's very likely to be in the deepest part of the Death Sacrifice Cave, Juan said. Xiaohei didn't say much and followed beside Juan. The two of them rushed towards the black stone arch bridge that led to the opposite shore of the island. The two of them weren't fast, but they were unusually cautious. As long as there was any movement in the wind, it basically couldn't escape Zhuowen's detection. After passing through the black stone arch bridge without any danger, what appeared at the end of the bridge was an extremely secluded path. The path was surrounded by black fog, and they couldn't see what was at the end of the path. Following the path, Zhuowen walked all the way. After about 6 hours, he finally reached the end of the path. Then, he found that the end of the path was actually an extremely large open space. At this moment, at the end of the open space, there was a high black slope. The high slope was surrounded by a seemingly solid black fog. In the middle of the black fog, Yuan found a Ganoderma that looked like 2 dragon heads. The Great Void Double Dragon Ganoderma. Zhuowen's eyes lit up, and he revealed an expression of wild joy. Without even thinking, he rushed towards the high slope. However, the moment Yuan approached the high slope, an ominous feeling arose in his heart. Then, he found that the seemingly solid black fog suddenly transformed into a huge double-headed dragon that opened its mouth to swallow Zhuan. Slash! Zhuan took a step back, and then suddenly slashed out with the Emperor sword in his hand. A terrifying sword chi whistled over and blasted onto the double-headed dragon. But what made Zhuowen's heart sink was that when the sword chi landed on the double-headed dragon, it only caused the black fog around its body to roll. Then, the double-headed dragon returned to its original state and continued to pounce towards Zhuan. Zhuan hurriedly retreated and slashed out again and again. He even used the 8th level Dao intent, but he was actually unable to completely cause any substantial damage to the double-headed dragon. With the help of the purple fog, Zhuan quickly dodged the double-headed dragon's attack. He didn't plan to fight the double-headed dragon head-on, but went around it from the side and directly grabbed the Great Void Double Dragon Ganoderma. Unfortunately, the double-headed dragon was extremely cautious. The moment Zhuowen went around it, the double-headed dragon withdrew its huge dragon body, and the huge double-headed dragon heads quickly greeted Zhuowen. "Bastard, you forced me to do this." Zhuowen was stunned. The surface of the Emperor sword in his hand was covered with a purple energy. Then, the purple fog around him rolled and condensed into a pattering purple rain. Chapter 2571. Chapter 2571. Chapter 2571. Mysterious Death Crystal. However, the two-headed dragon was extremely tenacious. While being squeezed by the purple spiral, it stirred up the death energy around it to resist the purple spiral. Moreover, although the purple spiral was sharp, it was gradually suppressed by the two-headed dragon. Zhuowen didn't panic. He waved the king's sword in his hand, and the purple rain around him condensed into purple crystals. The twin-headed dragon, which was wrapped in countless purple raindrops, was instantly frozen into a purple ice cube by the solidified purple rain. Cut! Zhuowen's sword landed on the purple ice cube. Then, the purple ice cube shattered, and the two-headed dragon inside shattered into countless pieces. After dealing with the two-headed dragon, Yuan let out a sigh of relief and walked to the top of the high slope. His gaze fell on the Grand Essence Double Dragon Ganoderma in the middle of the high slope. He let out a sigh, picked up the Grand Essence Double Dragon Ganoderma, and carefully placed it in a jade box. However, the moment Zhuowen picked up the Grand Essence Double Dragon Ganoderma, he suddenly felt a terrifying death energy rushing out from the bottom of the high slope. Like a fountain with a plug pulled out, the death energy gushed out like a fountain that had been blocked for a long time. What a dense death energy! Could it be that there's some other mystery behind this slope? Zhuowen's eyes flashed with surprise. His right palm fell on the high slope, and his divine power shook. Suddenly, the soil on the high slope was shattered. After the soil fell off, Yuan found an irregular black crystal inside the high slope. This black crystal was about 10 feet big, and countless black energy was flowing inside. This black energy was full of death energy, and Zhuowen knew that this black energy was death energy. This is the mysterious death crystal, an energy stone used to comprehend the mysterious death energy. How can there be such a big piece of mysterious death crystal here? Moreover, it's so pure. The moment Zhuowen's eyes fell on the black crystal, his eyes were filled with surprise. The mysterious death crystal was extremely precious in the 8 heavens because it was the best energy prepared for the life-comprehending realm to advance to the death-comprehending realm. It was said that the death energy inside was the easiest to transform into the mysterious death energy. Moreover, the death mysterious crystal was the raw material for refining the life-death pill, which showed how precious the death mysterious crystal was. The death mystic crystal in front of him was huge and rarely seen in the mortal world. Zhuowen knew that if he could absorb all the death energy within this death mystic crystal, there was a high chance that he would advance to the peak of the enlightenment death realm. With Zhuowen's current terrifying strength, his strength would multiply by more than a few times once he advanced into the death comprehension realm. At that time, even half-step Heaven Dao lords might not be a match for him. The real Heavenly Dao Master might be able to defeat him, but it would not be so easy to kill him. Thinking of this, Zhuowen's eyes lit up. However, Yuan didn't rashly sit on it to cultivate. Instead, he spent several days laying down several Tier 9 arrays around the death mysterious crystal. He even added a concealment array. After ensuring that nothing would go wrong, he sat on the death mysterious crystal and prepared to absorb the surging death energy within. Waves of death energy surged into his body, causing Zhuowen to feel the coldness of death. However, he quickly adapted to this coldness and immersed himself in it at the same time. This was because he realized that the death energy was changing his body step by step. It caused the divine energy in his body to combine with the death energy and transform into the profound death divine energy. Although the speed was very slow in the beginning, as time passed, the transformation speed of the profound death divine energy accelerated and became faster and faster. 2 months later, 1/3 of the death mysterious crystal that Zhuowen was sitting on had been consumed. At this moment, Zhuowen suddenly opened his eyes and let out a shrill cry. Rumble! Suddenly, the space behind Zhuowen split open and an enormous illusory sky bridge appeared. On the 9th step of the illusory sky bridge, a pure white lotus floated. Then, an extremely dense black energy appeared beside the lotus. It was the death energy. The death energy started to condense and actually started to transform into the shape of a lotus. In the end, it turned into a black lotus. When the black lotus was formed, Yuan clearly felt that in addition to the profound life divine energy, there was an additional profound death divine energy in his body. Looking at the black lotus floating beside the white lotus, Yuan revealed a smile. He knew that he had successfully advanced to the comprehension of death state. The profound death divine energy in his body would be even more terrifying and powerful than the profound life divine energy. I have finally advanced to the comprehension of death state. Next, I need to consolidate my realm and see if I can continue to increase my cultivation with the death mysterious crystal. After advancing to the comprehension of death state, Yuan was full of confidence. He continued to sit cross-legged on the death mysterious crystal. Like a whale sucking in water, he absorbed the death energy in the death mysterious crystal. 2 months later, the death mysterious crystal that Zhuowen was sitting on was completely consumed by him. Zhuowen's realm was completely consolidated. At the same time, he had reached the peak of the comprehension of death state. He was not far from the dual extremities of life and death. Zhuowen knew that as long as he comprehended the principle of the fusion of the divine energy of life and death, his realm would completely reach the dual extremities of life and death. Of course, comprehending something like this still depended on luck. Moreover, Zhuowen also knew that his current strength was far stronger than the experts in the dual extremities of life and death. Even if the Heavenly Dao Master personally came, Zhuowen would not be afraid. It's time to leave the death sacrifice cave. Unfortunately, I am still missing the 8 trigrams yang water. Zhuowen sighed. He had thoroughly explored the death sacrifice cave. He only found 2 Tier 9 divine herbs, the void bone refining ginseng and the great simplicity double dragon ganoderma. As for the 8 trigrams yang water, he had no clue at all. Since there were no more clues in the death sacrifice cave, Nguyen naturally would not stay for long. In the process of leaving the death sacrifice cave, Nguyen appeared to be extremely flamboyant. Along the way, he basically killed all the distorted figures in the death sacrifice cave. Naturally, he did this intentionally. After absorbing the death energy, the imperial sword had begun to transform into a divine tool. He knew very well that as it continued to absorb the death energy, the imperial sword would definitely be able to transform successfully. Therefore, in order to let the imperial sword completely transform, he naturally would not let go of the distorted figures in the death sacrifice cave to practice. Zhuan spent a few months to eliminate all the distorted figures in the death sacrifice cave. It was also after eliminating the last distorted figure that the imperial sword in Zhuan's hand actually collapsed into a wisp of death energy and poured into the space between Zhuan's eyebrows. What's going on? Zhuan found that his imperial sword had unknowingly entered his divine soul. But soon, with a thought, the imperial sword turned into a wisp of death energy and fell into his palm. Moreover, the imperial sword's aura was much stronger than before. It is said that a divine tool can exist in the divine soul with the will of its master. Chapter 2572. Death Sacrifice Sword Rumble. While Zhuan was puzzled, the sky of the death sacrifice cave was filled with black fog. Thunder rumbled out of nowhere. The king's sword in Zhuan's divine soul suddenly flew out towards the sky. Soon, thunder rumbled and the entire sky was filled with terrifying flashes of lightning. Even Zhuan's divine sense didn't dare to casually extend into the depths of the clouds because the lightning tribulation there was too terrifying. Even if it was just a trace, it could annihilate Zhuan's divine sense. It seems that this is the lightning tribulation for the king's sword to transform into a divine tool. It's really powerful. Zhuan looked at the lightning tribulation in the sky with fear. He was very clear that if he resisted the lightning tribulation with his current physical body, he would at least be seriously injured. If he wasn't careful, it was very likely that he would be directly destroyed by the lightning tribulation. The lightning tribulation lasted for an entire day and night. Zhuan paid attention to it all the time with a cautious expression. Although the lightning tribulation for a divine tool to transform into a divine tool was much weaker than that of a Dao-proving expert, it still couldn't be underestimated. If the king's sword couldn't withstand the lightning tribulation, then wouldn't it be crippled just like that? For Zhuan, this was a huge loss. When the lightning tribulation retreated, a loud sword cry came from the sky. Soon after, the king's sword rushed over like a stream of light and finally landed in front of Zhuan. At this moment, the surface of the king's sword had completely turned into the gray of death energy. The gray sword body was covered with complex patterns and the death energy contained an extremely rich Dao rhythm. The king's sword has successfully become a heavenly Dao divine tool. In the future, it won't be called the king's sword. Since it's a Dao-proving divine tool in the death sacrifice cave, then it'll be called the death sacrifice sword, Zhuan murmured in a low voice. Perhaps it felt that Zhuan had obtained a name, but the death sacrifice sword let out a clear sword cry and turned into a gray chi that entered Zhuan's divine soul between his eyebrows. This was the advantage of a Dao verification divine tool. It was a divine tool that could exist between substance and illusion. If it was not fighting, the Dao verification divine tool could turn into an illusion and coexist with the spirit. And once the battle started, the Dao-proving divine artifact would immediately materialize and become the most powerful killing weapon. This time, Zhuan's harvest could not be said to be small. Not only did his cultivation advance a step further and advance to the death realm, but the king's sword had also successfully proved its Dao in the death sacrifice cave and became a Dao-proving divine weapon. In the future, the sacrificial death sword would be another of his trump cards. Its power would probably be much stronger than phagocytosis. Of course, the power of the phagocytosis wasn't any weaker than the sacrifice of death sword. It was just that the 9,999 seals on the phagocytosis hadn't been completely broken. Once they were broken, the power of the phagocytosis wouldn't be any weaker than the sacrifice of death sword. In fact, it would be much stronger. When Zhuan rushed out of the death sacrifice cave, he immediately discovered an extremely dazzling flame in the deepest part of the boundless Taishu. This flame seemed to have the power to soar into the sky, as if it had the ability to burn the sky. Most of the regions of the boundless Taishu were enveloped by this flame. The moment the flame rose, Zhuan also received a message from the crepe myrtle Star Lord. A burning bug has appeared? Zhuan's eyes lit up as his interest was piqued. He knew that the burning bug was actually the Zhuronggu. His clone was still in the depths of the deserted planet's core. Through his connection with his clone, Zhuan was pleasantly surprised to discover that the energy emitted by the magma refined by the Zhuronggu could actually increase the clone's strength. Although Zhuan didn't know much about the path beyond the three extreme realms, he knew that the Zhuronggu could increase the strength of his clone at the three extreme realms. This would definitely be of great benefit to him. Since that was the case, Zhuan naturally wanted to obtain the main body of the Zhuronggu. As he thought of this, Zhuan rushed toward the core of the flame. In a short while, he arrived near the flame. At that moment, many cultivators had gathered there, and all of them were not weak. Zhuan even discovered several life enlightenment realm experts, who should be at the level of the hall masters of the 100 halls of the Taiching immortal realm. Among them, Zhuan also saw a familiar figure. This person was bald, wore a blood-red robe, and had an extremely pungent smell of blood. The hall master of the Blood Divine Hall, the Blood God. Zhuan glanced at the bald man in the blood-red robe and sneered. Back then, the Blood Divine Hall had sent wave after wave of assassins to kill him, causing him to have to use the Dao Intent Crystal in advance. Zhuan remembered this grudge clearly. At that time, Zhuan had turned the Divine Blood Hall upside down and had almost turned the entire Divine Blood Hall upside down. In the end, even though he had comprehended a trace of 9th level Dao insight, he still wasn't a match for the Blood God. Although it had been a long time, Zhuan did not take it to heart. However, now that he had encountered the Blood God, he naturally paid attention. If there was a chance, Zhuan would naturally not let the Blood God go. Of course, Zhuan would only consider this matter after the matter of the Zhuronggu was resolved. After all, everyone's attention was now on the Zhuronggu. If he were to kill the Blood God now, it would obviously be unreasonable. The Blood God immediately noticed Zhuan's unfriendly gaze. He coldly glanced at the white-clothed youth behind him and felt that this person was somewhat familiar. However, the Blood God could not remember where he had seen this person before. However, the Blood God had secretly memorized this white-clothed youth. How dare he look at him with such a gaze? He was simply courting death. After this matter was over, if the Blood God encountered this person again, he would definitely capture him and slowly torture him to death. Brother Zhua! A voice transmission was heard. Immediately, Crepe Myrtle Star quickly rushed to Zhuan's side. At the same time, Crepe Myrtle Star sized up Zhuan. He realized that he could not see through Zhuan at the moment. If the current Zhuan was placed in this group of cultivators, he would definitely be inconspicuous. However, Crepe Myrtle Star did not think that the white-clothed youth in front of him was just an ordinary cultivator. He knew that if the white-clothed youth showed off his abilities, the power that erupted would be extremely powerful and terrifying. Before parting ways in Wuji Taishu, Crepe Myrtle Star could still sense Zhuan's specific cultivation level. However, he could not sense it at all now. Thus, there was only one possibility: Zhuan's cultivation level had improved again. Thinking of this, Crepe Myrtle Star looked at Zhuan even more seriously and asked in an uncertain tone, "Brother Zhua, did you break through?" Zhuan smiled slightly and did not answer Crepe Myrtle Star's question. Instead, he looked ahead and said, "Brother Crepe Myrtle, can you tell me about the current situation?" Chapter 2573. Old Man Hei Fu, the burning bug mentioned by the Mountain River Hall's ancestor, has appeared. It's extremely violent as soon as it appeared. It actually erupted with extremely terrifying flames. This flame is extremely terrifying. If an 8th level Void Sky cultivator is hit by it, their soul and body will be annihilated. Even a Life Enlightenment Realm expert can barely withstand it. Moreover, I also found that this burning bug hasn't fully awakened, but its strength is already not weaker than an ordinary life and death realm expert. This guy is too terrifying. Speaking of this, Myrtle Star Sovereign's gaze turned serious. Although he had advanced to 3 extremities, his strength was at most equivalent to the life and death realm. There was still a big gap between him and the life and death realm. Zhuan nodded. His gaze landed in front of him. Tens of thousands of kilometers away, there were huge ruins of buildings. Flames soared into the sky from the ruins, and within them, there was the image of a burning insect that constantly roared furiously. Its voice contained a sliver of urgency, desire, and impatience. There were at least several hundred cultivators surrounding the buildings. Each of them was a formidable expert. Moreover, Yuan found that these cultivators were faintly following the lead of the dozen or so figures in front of them. The auras of these dozen or so figures were the strongest among the hundreds of people. They were all above the life enlightenment realm, and the blood god was one of them. Upon closer inspection, Zhuan found that these dozen or so people were standing behind one of them, as if they were subconsciously shorter than this person. This was an old man in a black robe. His aura was gentle, and his wrinkled face had a gentle smile. He was like an old man next door. Life and death realm? Zhuan's eyes flashed. He didn't expect that there would be a life and death realm expert in the Huaxia Heavenly Region aside from Taiqing. It seemed that the Huaxia Heavenly Region was hidden deep enough to have such an expert. Moreover, Zhuan also discovered an expert in the death realm among these people. This person was dressed in luxurious clothes and was about 30 years old. He stood behind the black-robed old man with an extremely respectful expression. Perhaps noticing Zhuan's gaze on the black-robed old man and the finely dressed man, Crepe Myrtle Star's gaze turned solemn. He hurriedly said, "Brother Zhua, these two are said to be reclusive experts of the Huaxia Heavenly Region. The black-robed old man is called Old Man Heifu. He once challenged Taiqing, but after being defeated, he went into seclusion. The man in luxurious clothes is called Jin Xin. He's the only disciple of Old Man Heifu, and he's an expert in the death comprehension realm. The other 10 are the palace masters of the 10 strongest palaces in the Grand Clarity Immortal Realm. They're all at the life comprehension realm." At this moment, a grave expression gradually appeared on Old Man Heifu's gentle face. Soon after, he leapt up and formed a seal with both hands. Immediately, a brilliant and colorful restriction formation rose from the ruins of the buildings. Zhuan raised his eyebrows. He had a higher opinion of Old Man Heifu. This old man was actually a level 9 divine array master. What he did just now was to activate the level 9 formation that he had set up in advance in the ruins of the buildings. Moreover, with Zhuan's level, he could tell at a glance that there was more than one level 9 formation set up around the ruins. Just now, there were 5 or 6 level 9 formations that had appeared. Moreover, Zhuan discovered that there should be other formations hidden within these 5 or 6 level 9 formations, but they hadn't been activated yet. Old Man Heifu was definitely an array master. To be able to set up so many level 9 formations together without any contradiction between them, this was definitely not something an ordinary level 9 divine array master could do. Even Zhuan would find it difficult to set up such a complicated combination of formations in a short period of time. Zhuan knew that the level 9 formation set up by Old Man Heifu was far more powerful than a level 9 formation. It was extremely terrifying. Bang, bang, bang. After the numerous grade 9 great arrays were activated, the enormous flaming bug within the ruins roared. Immediately, the great array was blasted until it was on the verge of collapse. Old Man Heifu's face turned solemn. He hadn't expected the Zhurong-gu to be so powerful. He had already set up 5 or 6 level 9 formations, but they were still on the verge of collapse. It was really unbelievable. Old Man Heifu roared and quickly formed a seal with both hands. Then, streams of light swept out from the bottom of the ruins, like a complicated meteor shower that flew up from the ground. It was extremely dazzling. Old Man Heifu set up 9 level 9 formations under the ruins. 9 returned to 1? Zhuan's gaze turned solemn. Based on Old Man Heifu's move, Zhuan knew that his array skills weren't so advanced. Moreover, Zhuan felt a destructive aura in the 9 return to 1 formation. He knew that even if he entered the formation now, although it wouldn't be life-threatening, he would at least be entangled, which would be quite troublesome for him. After the appearance of the 9 level 9 formations, the originally crumbling formation barrier seemed to have been strengthened and became much more stable. This is 9-9 return to 1. 9 of the 10 of you will stand in 9 different positions and work together to restrain this evil beast. Old Man Hei Fu let out a soft sigh and coldly said to the 10 hall masters behind him. Although the 10 hall masters were rather displeased, they didn't dare to not take action because of Old Man Hei Fu's reputation and the covetous Jin Shun behind him. Old Man Hei Fu, don't forget the benefits you promised. The blood god of the blood god temple said coldly. Teacher never goes back on his promises. As long as you assist him well, he will naturally have a way to help you quickly advance to the enlightenment of death state, Jin Shun sneered. The other hall masters' eyes were blazing. Although they all knew that the flaming bug was extremely extraordinary, they knew that it wouldn't be their turn to have it with Old Man Hei Fu around. Moreover, even if it was their turn, they wouldn't be able to recognize the bug's specific origin and wouldn't know how to subdue it. Compared to the flaming bug, they were more eager to enter the enlightenment of death state. After all, the enlightenment of death state was the biggest problem they were currently facing. Old Man Hei Fu hadn't been famous before, so much so that they didn't even know of his existence. That was until Old Man Hei Fu emerged and swept through the Tai Ching immortal realm with the life and death state. Coupled with the fact that the 3 clear venerables were all in seclusion, no one in the Tai Ching immortal realm was a match for Old Man Hei Fu. Old Man Hei Fu's reputation gradually grew. Naturally, these hall masters were extremely wary of Old Man Hei Fu. At the same time, they also wanted to know his experience in advancing to the life and death state. It could be said that this time, in addition to his strength, they had helped Old Man Hei Fu because he had promised to let them enter the enlightenment of death state. Chapter 2574. 9-9 to 1-9 hall masters flew to 9 different positions, while the remaining hall master flew to the top of the formation under Old Man Hei Fu's orders. Old Man Hei Fu landed beside Jin Shen and said solemnly, "The 10 of you, start mobilizing the mysterious life divine force in your bodies. At the same time, arrange the people you sent to the 80 positions below. 3 people can stand at each position. Move quickly." Although the 10 hall masters were unhappy with Old Man Hei Fu's order, they could only silently endure it for the sake of the benefits Old Man Hei Fu had promised. Under the orders of the 10 great hall masters, the surrounding cultivators all entered the great array. Very quickly, the originally powerful 9-9 return to 1 great array became much more powerful in an instant. Especially when the 10 temple masters and hundreds of experts entered the formation at the same time and injected all their divine power into the formation, the 9-9 to 1 great formation erupted with a terrifying power and suppressed the Zhurong venom in one fell swoop. "Which hall are you 2 from? Why aren't you helping?" When Old Man Hei Fu and Jin Shin noticed Juan and Crepe Myrtle Star standing far behind them, they were startled at first, but soon after, Jin Shin ordered coldly. Juan raised his eyebrows. He didn't expect Jin Shin to dare order the 2 of them, especially when he saw Jin Shin's somewhat urgent expression. Juan took another look at the 9-9 to 1 formation. Although he couldn't see anything wrong with the formation, Jin Shin's expression was a big problem. Not to mention that he felt something was wrong. Even if he didn't, he wasn't one of the 10 hall masters. Why would he go to the formation to help them? "We don't belong to any faction here." Crepe Myrtle Star snorted coldly and released his aura without hesitation. Jin Shen and Old Man Hei Fu took another look at Crepe Myrtle Star. At first, Crepe Myrtle Star's aura wasn't obvious, but once it was released, the pressure was extremely terrifying. It was probably not weaker than an ordinary Death Realm expert. "This person is not simple." Old Man Hei Fu narrowed his eyes. "Teacher, should we take action and teach this fellow a lesson?" Jin Shin's gaze changed slightly. Soon after, he spoke somewhat angrily. Old Man Hei Fu, however, shook his head and said, "Jin Shin, we should prioritize the important matters. There is no need to care about these 2 people. Right now, Master's main objective is that goo worm. If my guess is not wrong, it should be the Zhurongu. Others may not know the value of this thing, but Master knows a little about it. Since Old Man Heifu had spoken, Jin Shun could only give up. He coldly glanced at Purple Star Sovereign and silently stood behind Old Man Heifu. Zhuowen's attention fell on Old Man Heifu. He was surprised to find that Old Man Heifu had actually started to set up several level 9 defensive arrays around him. This Old Man Heifu is guarding against you? It seems like your aura just now has aroused his vigilance, Zhuowen said in a low voice. He even set up a level 9 formation around himself to guard against us. Could it be that he's planning to do something shameful? Crepe Myrtle Star Monarch said with some displeasure. I'm afraid he's planning to do something shameful. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed slightly. After setting up several level 9 defensive arrays around him, Old Man Heifu revealed a sinister smile. Then he quickly formed a seal with both hands, stretched out his right hand, and suddenly flicked it forward, shooting out a red energy beam. The moment the red energy beam landed on the array above the ruins, the originally transparent barrier suddenly turned blood red, like a blood-red barrier. It looked extremely strange and bloody. The instant the surface of the array was dyed blood red, the practitioners in all directions of the array suddenly felt their divine power being violently swallowed by the array's foundation. What's going on? My divine power is out of control. No, what's with this suction force? My divine power is being sucked dry by this suction force. Suddenly, the practitioners standing in all directions of the array felt the abnormality of the array and became restless. The pupils of the 10 Hall Masters constricted. They also felt the terrifying suction force constantly swallowing the divine power in their bodies. Moreover, the devouring power was extremely violent and the speed of the devouring was terrifying. At this rate, the divine power in their bodies would be completely devoured by the devouring power in less than 2 hours. When they tried to summon their divine power to break free from this suction force, they found that they couldn't do it at all. Moreover, the more they struggled, the more terrifying the suction force became. It was as if it wanted to suck away all the divine power in their bodies. Old Man Heifu, what's going on with your array? Blood God looked gloomily at Old Man Heifu. Not only Blood God, but the other 9 Hall Masters also looked coldly at Old Man Heifu, an ominous premonition in their hearts. Old Man Heifu smiled faintly and said, "Everyone, don't worry. Since you're willing to sacrifice your lives for this old man to capture this insect, this old man will not forget you. As long as I capture this insect, this old man promises that the 10 great halls will continue to prosper." As soon as Old Man Heifu said this, everyone's mood sank. Among them, several hall masters cursed Old Man Heifu, saying that his words were like farts and that he had no integrity at all. Old Man Heifu didn't care about their curses and formed a seal with both hands. Immediately, the suction force became several times stronger. 2 hours later, most of the cultivators in the 9-9-1 Great Array had been sucked dry, and the 10 Hall Masters were basically as thin as twigs. Although they were not dead yet, they were not far from death. So ruthless, no wonder these 2 fellows were on guard against us. So this was their plan. Standing not far away, Crepe Myrtle Star Monarch had an ugly expression. He finally understood why Jin Shin had insisted that the 2 of them enter the array. It turned out that it was used as a trap. Zhuowen sneered in his heart as he watched silently. At first, he didn't expect Old Man Heifu to be so black-hearted. He actually used the excuse of working together to trick all of them. Poor 10 Hall Masters. Not only did they not get any benefits, but they were also beaten black and blue. They couldn't even protect their lives. Zhuowen glanced at Xue Xin. He knew that he didn't need to do anything. Xue Xin wasn't far from dying. Jin Shin's gaze also fell on Zhuowen, his eyes full of warning. Condense! Old Man Heifu suddenly jumped to the top of the array and grabbed the surface of the array with his skinny right hand. Soon after, the divine power of the 10 Hall Masters was quickly sucked dry and they died. The blood on the surface of the array was extremely dense. Bang, bang, bang. Soon after, the crimson formation began to shrink, and the ruins within the formation began to turn into ashes. The flames that soared into the sky also gradually shrank and were gradually extinguished within the shrinking formation. The flame insect at the center of the flames let out a furious roar. Although it continued to spit out terrifying flames, it was useless against this blood-red array. Chapter 2575. Jin Shenjuan silently looked at the goo bug that was bound by the blood-red magic formation. Zhuowen was familiar with the goo bug's aura, as it was exactly the same as the Zhu Rong goo bug that he had obtained. Moreover, the goo's aura was much stronger than the goo fragment he obtained, but its power was weaker than the second fragment. Zhuowen knew that the Zhu Rong goo had been dormant for countless years. In addition, it had been separated from the ancestral sorcerer and existed independently. Without the nourishment of energy, it would only become weaker and weaker. As for the second fragment of the Zhu Rong goo he obtained, because it had always been in the core of the planet and had been nourished by magma for many years, it was even stronger. Although the Zhu Rong goo kept struggling, the blood-red formation was too powerful and seemed to be extremely restraining. Therefore, the Zhu Rong goo could not break free from the formation. In the end, the blood-red formation turned into a blood-red ball the size of a palm. In the center of the ball, a goo with less than half of its body was constantly scurrying around, and blazing flames were constantly spewing out. Old Man He Fu laughed heartily as he looked at the goo in the blood-red ball in his hand. His eyes were filled with passion and excitement. Purple Star Sovereign's eyes flickered as he looked at Jun and sighed. "Brother Zhua, it seems that we are a step too late. This goo has been taken by Old Man He Fu. It's impossible for us to snatch it." Purple Star Sovereign thought that although he was strong, he still felt that he was not a match for Old Man He Fu, who was at the two extremes of life and death. At most, he was about the same as Old Man He Fu's disciple, Jin Shen. Zhuowen smiled faintly and said, "Why not? But before we do, I want to ask Old Man He Fu a few questions." Purple Star Sovereign was startled. He looked at Zhuowen and quickly said, "Brother Zhua, Old Man He Fu is an expert at the two extremes of life and death. You?" Although Purple Star Sovereign did not say it explicitly, his meaning was obvious. Although Zhuowen had killed Great Brahma back then, Great Brahma was only at the life comprehension realm. By relying on the heaven domain origin, he was only comparable to an early-stage death comprehension realm cultivator. There was a huge gap between him and an expert at the life and death extremes. For Zhuowen to be able to kill Great Brahma, Crepe Myrtle Star believed that his strength was around the late stage or peak of the enlightenment of Death Realm. He did not believe that Zhuowen was a match for Old Man He Fu, who was at the two extremes of life and death. "Don't worry, Brother Ziwei. I know what I'm doing. Moreover, didn't you notice that when Old Man He Fu set up the array around us, he also included our area? Do you think you can leave just because you want to?" Zhuowen said indifferently, and then slowly walked towards Old Man He Fu and Jin Shen. Myrtle Star Monarch's expression was somewhat ugly. With Zhuowen's reminder, he also discovered that there was indeed an array formation's energy circulating around him. Jin Shen and Old Man He Fu also discovered that Jun was slowly walking over, and their gazes revealed ridicule and disdain. The aura of the white-clothed youth in front of them was extremely ordinary, and he looked much weaker than the purple-robed man. Wasn't this person courting death by walking directly towards them? Zhuowen stopped dozens of meters away from the two, looked at the goo worm in the blood-colored sphere in Old Man He Fu's hand, and said indifferently, "You know the origin of this goo worm?" Old Man He Fu glanced indifferently at Jun and sneered, "Of course I know. What? Is there a problem?" Zhuowen's gaze was calm as he continued, "Since you know, then tell me everything you know, then hand over the goo worm in your hand to me, and then you can scram." Jin Shen, Old Man He Fu, and even Myrtle Star Monarch were stunned. Clearly, they did not expect that Jun would dare to speak such arrogant words. "What did you just say?" Jin Shen said with an unfriendly gaze. The smile on Old Man He Fu's face faded a lot, and his eyes were filled with terrifying killing intent. "Didn't you hear what I said just now? Are you deaf?" Zhuowen said indifferently. "Courting death." Jin Shen roared, and a 2-meter-long staff appeared in his hand. In an instant, it appeared behind Zhuowen's head, and he swung it fiercely, wanting to blow up his head. Bang! Zhuan stretched out his right hand, and a death aura suddenly lingered around his arm. He appeared behind his head without anyone noticing, and grabbed the long staff in his hand. How is this possible? Jin Shen looked at the long staff in his hand, and then at the white-clothed youth in front of him in disbelief. His all-out attack was actually caught so easily? A mere early-stage comprehension death stage cultivator dares to attack me head-on? You're courting death. A ghostly voice came out of Zhuowen's mouth, and then Jin Shen discovered in horror that terrifying death energy lingered around him. The death energy transformed into extremely sturdy chains that bound him to the spot, making him unable to move at all. Jin Shen watched in horror as Zhuowen's hand of death slowly extended toward his glabella. Although the speed was slow, Jin Shen was unable to move. He could only watch as the hand finally pressed into the depths of his glabella, destroying his divine soul and crushing his illusory heavenly bridge. No, in the end, Jin Shen could only cry out in despair. His consciousness gradually blurred, and finally his vision turned completely black. The fight between Zhuowen and Jin Shen was over in the blink of an eye. Before Crepe Star Sovereign and Old Man Heifu could react, the battle was already over. Chapter 2576. Soul Searching, the Power of Tao Insight? Who are you to the Grand Pure One? Old Man Heifu's expression changed slightly when he saw the purple mist around Zhuowen, and his gaze became increasingly furious. You talk too much. Zhuowen's gaze was indifferent. The purple mist rapidly spread, and Zhuowen's speed was extremely fast. However, when Zhuowen approached Old Man Heifu, he was immediately blocked by a powerful restriction. Old Man Heifu had obviously been prepared for this and had even set up a restriction around himself to guard against him. However, Zhuowen was a level 9 Divine Array Master, so these restrictions could only block him for a moment before he quickly broke through them. Old Man Heifu's expression became increasingly unsightly. He took out a bronze scepter and leaped up. Green lightning exploded from the scepter and rapidly blasted toward Zhuowen. The azure-colored lightning was extremely fast, and wherever it passed, the purple fog was dispersed by the azure-colored lightning. It instantly caught up to Zhuowen. The moment the green lightning struck, Zhuowen felt his entire body go numb. It was as if his flesh and blood had been separated, and it was extremely painful. Fortunately, Zhuowen's physical body was sufficiently terrifying. Although the green lightning was powerful, it only paralyzed Zhuowen for a moment before he immediately escaped from the range of the green lightning. He's actually fine? How can this guy's physical body be so strong? Old Man Heifu looked in surprise at Zhuowen, who had escaped from the green lightning. This was the first time he had been defeated by the green lightning. In the past, whenever he used the green lightning, he would always be able to catch his opponents off guard and seriously injure them and paralyze them for a period of time. During this period of paralysis, his opponents were naturally at his mercy. However, the green lightning had caught Zhuowen off guard and allowed him to escape in an instant. This was the first time Old Man Heifu had encountered such a situation. Let's see how strong your physical body is. Old Man Heifu let out a cold snort as his bronze scepter exploded with a myriad of green lightning bolts. They were so dense that they actually transformed into a green lightning vortex in an area of 30,000 meters. This huge vortex of azure lightning appeared right below Zhuowen. Its terrifying suction force was like a whale sucking in water, sucking in everything around it and crushing them into dust. Myrtle Star Monarch, who was standing at the periphery, looked at this scene in shock. His eyes were filled with worry. The azure lightning vortex was extremely terrifying. He knew very well that if he was sucked in, he would die without a burial place. Although Zhuowen was powerful, Crepe Myrtle Star was still worried about whether Zhuowen could withstand such a terrifying green lightning vortex. Zhuowen floated above the center of the azure lightning vortex, his brows slightly furrowed as he felt the terrifying suction force below. Zhuowen's entire body stiffened in the air, on the verge of collapse. Looks like I underestimated this Old Man Heifu. Zhuowen sighed in his heart. This Old Man Heifu's strength should be above Palace Master Wuju's. He was probably at the late stage of life and death stage, not far from the peak stage. Brat, if you don't want to die, surrender. I won't kill you. As long as you listen to me obediently and be my dog, I will give you endless benefits. Old Man Hei Fu held his bronze scepter as he looked at Yuan bitterly struggling in the azure lightning vortex. His eyes were filled with pride as he spoke indifferently. Zhuowen's strength was extremely powerful. Old Man Hei Fu wanted to subdue him. After all, in the 8 heavens, there were too few experts at Zhuowen's level. If he could subdue Zhuowen, it would be much easier for him to act in the future. Moreover, Jin Shen was killed, which was equivalent to him losing a capable subordinate. Letting this Zhuan replace him was naturally a good choice. Zhuan looked coldly at Old Man Hei Fu and said, I'll give you one more chance. Put everything away and submit to me. Hand over the goo worm and I'll spare your life. Old Man Hei Fu shook his head inwardly and said, This is the first time I've seen someone as arrogant as you. You're already a turtle in a jar, yet you still dare to speak such arrogant words. I really don't know where your confidence comes from. Zhuan smiled and said, Then I'll show you where my confidence comes from. As he spoke, a gray aura flew out from between Zhuowen's eyebrows and turned into a gray divine sword. The moment this gray divine sword appeared, terrifying death energy spread in all directions, turning into a death vortex even larger and more terrifying than the azure lightning vortex. Under such a whirlpool of death, the shockingly powerful green lightning whirlpool actually collapsed and disappeared. The white-clothed youth, who should have been in imminent danger, was now holding the gray divine sword in his right hand and stepping on the death vortex, slowly walking towards Old Man Hei Fu. This, a divine artifact, exists in the spirit. Is this a Dao verification divine artifact? Impossible. How can there be a Dao verification divine artifact in the 8 heavens? Old Man Hei Fu cried out in alarm, his eyes filled with fear. He raised the bronze scepter in his right hand, and countless azure lightning bolts burst out, blasting toward Zhuan again. Unfortunately, Zhuowen merely swung his sword once, and these green lightning bolts were completely dispersed like clay chickens and pottery dogs. Then, Zhuowen shot forward like an arrow, slashing out with his sword at Old Man Hei Fu. Old Man Hei Fu felt the threat of death and hurriedly raised his bronze scepter to block the sword. Unfortunately, when the bronze scepter and the death sacrifice sword collided, a crisp sound burst out. Then, the bronze scepter was split into 2, and the death sacrifice sword followed the trajectory of the strike and cut off Old Man Hei Fu's left hand from his shoulder. Blood splattered into the air, followed by Old Man Hei Fu's terrified scream. However, Old Man Hei Fu was extremely experienced. The moment his left hand was cut off, he immediately took out an escape talisman, crushed it, and turned into a stream of light, intending to leave this place. Unfortunately, Old Man Hei Fu had only escaped tens of thousands of kilometers away when the surrounding space-time distorted, reversing his route as if he was walking on the spot. Space-time force? How can you use space-time force? How is this possible? Old Man Hei Fu's face was ashen. He knew that Zhuowen had reversed space-time. It could be said that this space was under the control of this white-clothed youth. Even if he had an escape talisman, it would be useless. Unless he was strong enough to tear apart the starry sky, but unfortunately, Old Man Hei Fu might not be able to do so even at his peak, let alone in his current state of serious injury. Zhuowen grabbed Old Man Hei Fu's head with his right hand, intending to search his soul. Bastard, how dare you search my soul? Old Man Hei Fu's veins bulged as he tried to resist, but he couldn't move. His entire body was imprisoned by Zhuan. You are very strong, but your spirit is at most on par with mine. Forcibly searching my soul won't do you any good. Old Man Hei Fu sneered. Chapter 2577. News of the 8 diagrams Byung water. After soul searching, Zhuowen's face was incomparably pale, and his forehead was covered in cold sweat. Old Man Hei Fu's eyes were lifeless. After soul searching, his soul had been erased by Zhuan. After taking Old Man Black Fu's spirit ring and taking out the Zhurong Gu, Zhuowen's heart was heavy because he saw a different piece of information in Old Man Black Fu's memories, A piece of information that even he felt was inconceivable. The origin of this starry sky began during the Earth's mythological era. This was the most profound sentence in Old Man Heifu's memory. Zhuan did not know what the meaning of this sentence was, but he knew that Earth was definitely not ordinary. Thinking of this, Zhuan had the urge to return to Earth again. But soon, Zhuan calmed down. From this sentence in Old Man Heifu's memory, Zhuan knew that the mythological era of Old Man Heifu's Earth had already passed, and the current Earth was not the Earth in Old Man Heifu's memory. Zhuan also realized that the 12 ancestral sorcerers were the gods and demons in Earth's mythology. However, the 12 ancestral sorcerers had now appeared in the untainted heavenly realm and became the ancestors of the sorcerer tribe in the untainted heavenly realm. Maybe I should go to Earth again, but not now, Zhuan murmured, but his gaze fell on the Zhu Rong worm in his hand. Zhuan remembered that in Huaxia mythology on Earth, the 12 ancestors of sorcerers were transformed from Pangu's blood essence. Zhuan used to be a descendant of Huaxia. Although he didn't pay much attention to Huaxia mythology, he still knew about the famous ancient god Pangu. According to legend, Pangu used the Panga banner to split open the chaos. He used the Taiji diagram to determine the earth, fire, wind, and water. He separated the clear from the turbid universe, opened up the primordial world, and evolved the 6 paths of reincarnation. Pangu was unable to support the power of heaven and earth and died. His primordial spirit was split into the 3 primordial ones to create heaven and earth. Most of his blood essence turned into the 12 ancestors of sorcery, and a small part of it flowed in the 6 paths of reincarnation. If the 12 ancestors of sorcery in Huaxia mythology were really related to the 12 ancestors of sorcery in the untainted heavenly realm, wouldn't it mean that the 3 pure ones of Huaxia heavenly realm were transformed from Pangu's primordial spirit? However, since the 12 ancestors of sorcery had once dominated the untainted heavenly domain, they were at least supreme experts at the 3rd step of Tao validation. However, in Zhuan's opinion, the 3 pure ones of the Huaxia heavenly domain had not even stepped into the realm of Taoism. There was a huge gap between the two, and there was also a long gap in time. Could there really be a connection between the two? For a moment, Zhuan felt that all of this was full of doubts. Whether it was the 8 heavenly domains, Shenmi heavenly domain, or the Great Desolate heavenly domain, he didn't seem to know anything about them. Tai Ching. Zhuan thought of Tai Ching and knew that he could only look for Tai Ching now. All along, the Grand Pure One's reputation was unknown and extremely mysterious. Even if Zhuan's cultivation had attained the Death Comprehension realm now, he was still bewildered when he thought about the Grand Pure One. Zhuan knew that the Grand Pure One must know something. Brother Zhua, congratulations. You have obtained this goo worm. If you give it to the Patriarch of the Mountain River Hall, you might be able to obtain the specific cultivation method after the 3 extreme realms. Crepe Myrtle Star cupped his hands and said enviously to Zhuan. Zhuan shook his head and said, I won't give this to the Patriarch of the Mountain River Hall. Crepe Myrtle Star was stunned and didn't react. He asked, Brother Zhua, what do you mean? If there really is a cultivation method after that, I will take out something of equal value to exchange. If the Mountain River Patriarch doesn't know what's good for him, then what's the harm in killing him? Zhuan put his hands behind his back and a strong aura emerged. Zhuan was now standing at the peak of the 8 heavenly domains. Even if the Mountain River Patriarch was powerful, so what? Zhuan didn't care at all. The only thing that could threaten him now was a true Tao validation powerhouse. Crepe Myrtle Star looked at Zhuan with a complicated gaze and sighed softly. He realized that he couldn't see through the white-robed young man before him. Brother Crepe Myrtle, take me to see the Mountain River Hall Patriarch, Zhuan said to Crepe Myrtle Star. Although Crepe Myrtle Star wanted to persuade him, he could only swallow his words when he thought of Zhuan's strength. He nodded and said, then let's leave Boundless Taishu first. I think the news of what happened in Boundless Taishu will spread very quickly. Before that happens, we'd better be careful. Zhuan smiled faintly but didn't say anything. If it had been in the past, Zhuan would have indeed acted carefully. However, he wouldn't do that now. Even if he didn't rely on his clone, the strength of his human body was already at the peak of the 8 heavenly domains. There was nothing in the 8 heavenly domains that could threaten Zhuan. When one's strength reached a certain peak, one would really lose the heart of a powerhouse if they were still afraid. Zhuan didn't intend to keep a low profile when he returned to the heavenly domain of China this time. When the two of them left boundless Taishu, the periphery of boundless Taishu was still as peaceful as before. It was obvious that the cultivators in the periphery didn't know what had happened in boundless Taishu. However, the news would spread very quickly. When they arrived at the periphery of boundless Taishu, Yuan immediately contacted Lan Ji. Not long after, Lan Ji arrived in front of Zhuo Wen, nodding and bowing. "Lan Ji, have you done what I asked you to do?" Zhuo Wen asked casually. He didn't expect Lan Ji to know about the 8 trigrams divination water. He was just asking casually. Lan Ji's spirits were lifted as he hurriedly said, "Sir, I happened to receive news about the 8 trigrams divination water a few days ago." Zhuan was stunned for a moment before a look of surprise appeared in his eyes. He looked at Lan Ji and asked, "Really?" Sir, don't worry. The news I received is absolutely true." Lan Ji was delighted when he saw that Zhuan was interested. "Not bad, you did a good job. Tell me more about the 8 trigrams divination water." Zhuan said. Lan Ji hurriedly nodded and immediately told him about the 8 trigrams divination water. It turned out that in half a month's time, the Tai Ching Immortal Realm would hold a 100 halls auction. It was said that the 100 halls auction would be held once every 100 years. Each time, it would be hosted by one of the 100 halls. Basically, every hall would have a turn. According to Lan Ji, this year's 100 halls auction would be hosted by the second hall of the 100 halls, the Mountain River Hall. It was said that not only would the Mountain River Hall master attend the auction, but even the Mountain River Hall ancestor, who had been reclusive for a long time, would also be present. Obviously, this auction would be much grander than the previous ones. After all, if an expert like the Mountain River Hall ancestor was present, there would definitely be something extraordinary to be auctioned. Lan Ji also heard that the 8 trigrams divination water would appear in this 100 halls auction. Chapter 2578. 100 Halls Auction House. The Mountain River Hall was ranked second among the 100 halls in the Grand Pure Immortal Realm. The Mountain River Hall was located at the peak of an endless mountain range, surrounded by countless rivers. Standing in the Mountain River Hall, one could overlook the majestic scenery of the endless mountains and rivers below. Zhuan and the Purple Star Monarch were led by Lan Ji to the bottom of the Mountain River Hall. The surrounding rivers were like snakes coiling around each other. Above the clear water and long river stood countless mountains. They were like giants that guarded the palace that seemed to have existed since ancient times. This palace was called the Mountain River Hall. Standing at the foot of the mountain, Zhuan looked up at the palace and said, "It's really imposing. This Mountain River Hall is much more imposing than the Virtue Hall." Lan Ji smiled embarrassedly. In terms of imposing, the Mountain River Hall was indeed more imposing than the Virtue Hall. However, in terms of fame, the Mountain River Hall couldn't be compared to the Virtue Hall. Although the Virtue Hall didn't have many people and the Grand Pure Immortal didn't accept disciples, the Grand Pure Immortal himself was a signboard. With the Grand Pure Immortal in charge, the Virtue Hall would always be the #1 hall. Without the Grand Pure Immortal, the Virtue Hall was nothing. The Virtue Hall's position was supported by the Grand Pure Immortal. "My lord, don't underestimate the Mountain River Hall. Although the Hall Master of the Mountain River Hall isn't much in the Grand Pure Immortal Realm, the Mountain River Hall has a Mountain River ancestor. He's the strongest Hall Master of the Mountain River Hall and he's still alive." Lan Ji suddenly said mysteriously, "It is said that the Mountain River Patriarch has cultivated 3 extreme realms. After countless years, his strength has become even more unfathomable. The Mountain River Patriarch once fought with Honorable Tai Ching, and he was only slightly weaker." Zhuan nodded. The Purple Star Monarch had already told him about the Mountain River ancestor. Speaking of which, Zhuan was quite interested in the Mountain River ancestor. After all, Zhuan's clone had also cultivated the 3 extreme realms. In addition, Crepe Myrtle Star had said that Patriarch Mountain River had the cultivation method of the 3 extreme realms. This made Zhuan very eager to meet Patriarch Mountain River. Moreover, my lord, you can't see the distribution of the mountains and rivers below the Mountain River Hall, right? To tell you the truth, there must be a stream of green water at the bottom of each mountain, which represents a level 9 formation. Around the Mountain River Hall, there are 99 such mountains and rivers. In other words, there are 99 level 9 Great Arrays, which form the world-famous Great Mountain River Great Array. Speaking of this, Lan Ji's eyes were filled with awe. What an extravagant move! 99 rank 9 Great Arrays form a Great Mountain River Great Array. Once this array is activated, I'm afraid that even life and death realm experts would be left behind. Crepe Myrtle Star Sovereign frowned slightly as he glanced at Zhuan beside him. He knew that the white-robed youth beside him was likely to cause trouble in Shanha Hall. If Shanha Hall activated the Great Mountain River Great Array, he believed that even Zhuan would have to bear a grudge. Crepe Myrtle Star Sovereign understood Zhuan's character. He knew that Zhuan was not an impulsive, brainless person. Since there was such a terrifying Great Array in Shanha Hall, he knew that Zhuan would definitely consider his next course of action carefully. I see that many people have already entered. Let's go in as well. Zhuan's expression was calm. No other emotions could be seen on his face. Lan Ji nodded and bowed hurriedly as he led Zhuan and Crepe Myrtle Star Sovereign inside. When Zhuan and the others entered Shanha Hall, an inconspicuous, abandoned planet in the periphery of Wuji Taishu suddenly exploded and lava spilled out in all directions. However, something strange happened very quickly. The lava that was spilling out suddenly stopped. Then, as if it had been attracted by an extremely terrifying suction force, it gathered at a point in the middle. When all the magma condensed at the center, a young man in a black robe appeared in the center. The black-robed man's expression was indifferent. His sharp eyes looked in the direction of the Taiching immortal realm as he muttered softly, "My main body has already arrived at Shanha Hall. Since that Shanha Hall is not simple, I'll follow them, just in case." The black-robed man was Zhuan's clone. His clone had basically been staying with the fragment of the Zhuronggu all this time. It had to be said that the lava energy in the depths of the planet's core was unimaginably beneficial to the fragment of the Zhuronggu. While staying in the planet's core, the fragment of the Zhuronggu had become more and more powerful under the nourishment of the lava. In the end, it had almost reached the level of the clone. If the fragment of the Zhuronggu attacked now, even the clone would not be able to deal with it. Fortunately, the fragment of the Zhuronggu had been completely refined by the clone. Now, the fragment of the Zhuronggu would only feel close to the aura of the clone and the main body. It would not have any hostility. Moreover, after the fragment of the Zhuronggu refined the lava energy, the energy produced would be unimaginably beneficial to the clone, who had already reached the 3 extremes. During this time, although the clone's cultivation had not changed, his strength had increased by a lot. There was a huge square in front of Shanha Hall. The square was surrounded by huge stones. In the center of the square stood a high platform. Below the platform was a huge open space. There were rows of praying mats neatly arranged in the open space. Each praying mat had a jade token floating above it. There were thousands of praying mats in the square. However, compared to the number of people who had come to Shanha Hall this time, these thousands of praying mats were simply a drop in the bucket. After all, there were tens of thousands of cultivators who had come to participate in the 100 Halls auction. Most of the people who could sit on the praying mats were powerhouses with high status. Zhuan and Crepe Myrtle Star Monarch were led by Lan Ji to sit on 2 relatively remote praying mats. Zhuan looked at Lan Ji with appreciation. Lan Ji's strength was not bad, but his ability to do things was greater than his strength. He had quietly found 2 seats for them. Including Lan Ji, there were 3 seats in total. Zhuan noticed the jade token floating above the praying mats. Lan Ji, who was sitting next to him, quickly explained, "My lord, this jade token is used for bidding. You can use your divine sense to transmit your bid to the jade token. The jade token will transmit your bid to the entire square." Zhuan nodded and immediately sat on the praying mat. He closed his eyes and rested, waiting for the auction to begin. Chapter 2579. Mountain River Ancestor, have you guys heard? The seal on Boundless Taishu has been lifted. I heard that the flaming bug that caused a commotion in Boundless Taishu has been taken away. Really? Who took it away? Why isn't there any news about it? It's strange. I heard that Old Man Heifu had gathered the Blood Divine Hall, Purple Cloud Hall, and 10 other top-ranked halls to find the bug and encircle it. In the end, the 10 great halls and Old Man Heifu went missing. It said that they've all fallen and the flaming bug has mysteriously disappeared. No way! It's so strange. Who took the flaming bug? I'm not sure about this either. Since the seal on Boundless Taishu has been lifted, it means that the flaming bug is no longer in Boundless Taishu. As for where it went? I don't know either. The 2 cultivators next to him started chatting because they were bored. They talked about the flaming bug in Boundless Taishu. Crepe Myrtle Star Monarch glanced at the calm Zhuoan and thought to himself, if these 2 know that the culprit who stole the bug is right next to them, what kind of expression would they have? When Lan Ji heard the conversation between the 2, he couldn't help but glance at Zhuoan. He remembered that the time when the flaming bug was taken away seemed to coincide with the time when the white-clothed young man in front of him came out of Boundless Taishu. Lan Ji suspected that the flame bug had been taken away by his master. If it was really his master who had done it, Lan Ji would be even more in awe. He knew that the fall of Old Man Heifu and the 10 great halls was likely related to his master. Whether it was the Blood Divine Hall, Purple Cloud Hall, or the other halls, they were not weaker than Lan Chi Hall. Among them, Old Man Heifu's name reverberated like thunder in Lan Ji's ears. If all of these people had fallen because of his master, then Lan Ji really couldn't imagine how powerful his master was. The auction is about to start. Look, the Mountain River Hall master has come out too. Suddenly, the originally quiet surroundings became noisy and noisy. Then, everyone looked forward and saw 3 figures walking over from the high platform. Among the 3 people, one of them was very old. His aura was not strong, and he was wearing formal clothes. He was clearly the auctioneer sent by the Mountain River Hall. The aura of the second person was robust, and he was at the prime of his life. His gaze was bright like lightning, and it seemed as if it contained blazing light that could swallow the sun and moon. The third person looked like an ordinary old man. He wore training clothes and had his hands behind his back. He coughed violently from time to time, as if he was about to enter a coffin. The moment these 3 people appeared, everyone's eyes were surprisingly focused on the ordinary-looking old man. Their eyes were all filled with reverence. My lord, that old man is the patriarch of Mountain River Hall. Although he has not appeared in public for a long time, he was famous before he went into seclusion. He challenged many experts and many experts know him. Lan Ji explained to Zhuoan. Zhuoan nodded and his sharp gaze fell on the patriarch of Mountain River Hall. Although the patriarch of Mountain River Hall looked like an ordinary old man, Zhuoan could feel a shocking power in his body. Thank you for coming to the Mountain River Hall. This 100 hall auction will not disappoint you. The middle-aged man's voice was like thunder. When he spoke, it was like rolling thunder. He cupped his hands at the people below. The people below quickly cupped their hands and returned the greeting. The middle-aged man was the current Mountain River Hall master, Su Yangqi. Su Yangqi returned the greeting and then retreated behind the patriarch of Mountain River. Obviously, the patriarch of Mountain River Hall had something to say. The patriarch of Mountain River Hall coughed a few times. Then, his slightly turbid eyes slowly scanned the surroundings. Finally, his gaze fell on the place where the Crepe Myrtle Star Sovereign was, and he ignored him. After the patriarch of Mountain River Hall retracted his gaze, he slowly opened his mouth and said, I am Su Liang. Perhaps many of you have heard of me, and perhaps some of you have not. However, that is not important. Today I, Su Liang, only have one purpose in attending this auction. That is to see the fellow Taoist who obtained the flame worm. As long as you are willing to exchange the flame worm with me, I am willing to pay any price to exchange it with you. As soon as these words came out, the people in the square were in an uproar and looked at each other. No one expected Su Liang to say such words. Could it be that Su Liang was so sure that the cultivator who obtained the flame worm had come to attend the auction? The crepe myrtle star sovereign revealed a trace of a bitter smile. He knew that Su Liang said this because he saw him. After Su Liang finished speaking, he looked at the crepe myrtle star sovereign and then walked down the high platform. He sat cross-legged on a praying mat not far away and closed his eyes to rest. Now, let the auction begin. Next, our auctioneer will preside over it. Su Yangqi smiled and also left the high platform. The old man in formal clothes bowed to the crowd and began to preside over the auction. The auction proceeded in a lukewarm manner. The items that came out at the beginning were not too eye-catching, and there were very few bids. The next item to be presented is a Dao fruit. It is said that the auctioneer obtained it from a secret realm. I heard that a Dao confirming expert once stayed in that secret realm, so he left behind a Dao fruit. I think everyone is clear about the value of this Dao fruit. The starting price is 5 million high-grade divine stones. Each bid must not be less than 10,000 high-grade divine stones. The auctioneer introduced the Dao fruit in detail with just a few words. As soon as the auctioneer finished speaking, the bidding became much more lively. Clearly, many cultivators were determined to obtain the Dao fruit. Zhuan glanced at the Dao fruit indifferently and no longer paid attention to it. This Dao fruit was much worse than the Dao fruit he obtained from Ma Yujie. It couldn't enter his eyes at all, so he didn't bid at all. In the end, the Dao fruit was sold for 30 million high-grade divine stones. It was undoubtedly a sky-high price. The following items were more and more precious, which set off a wave of excitement. The bidding continued endlessly. During this time, the purple star sovereign made a few bids. Unfortunately, the bids of the others were too high. In the end, the purple star sovereign could only embarrass himself. The next item to be auctioned is a level 9 divine medicine. This divine medicine is called the 8 trigrams yang water. It can be considered an extremely precious type of level 9 divine medicine. The auctioneer's next words immediately attracted Zhuan's attention. Zhuan stared at the beautiful female cultivator who was carrying a tray up from below. The auctioneer removed the red cloth on the tray, revealing the true appearance of the item inside. Above the tray, there was a palm-sized 8 trigrams array disc. A few inches above the center of the 8 trigrams array disc, there was a small blazing sun the size of 3 thumbs. Whether it was the 8 trigrams array disc or the small blazing sun, their surfaces pulsed with ripples like water. These two were actually formed from a mysterious type of water. Chapter 2580. To keep by force the instant the 8 trigrams yang water appeared in front of everyone, it immediately attracted everyone's attention. The starting bid for this 8 trigrams divination yang water is 3 million high-grade divine stones, and each bid cannot be lower than 10,000 divine stones. The auctioneer revealed an enchanting smile. Just as he finished speaking, a voice suddenly rang out, 10 million high-grade divine stones. As soon as this voice sounded out, the entire scene was in an uproar. Numerous gazes descended onto a meditation cushion in a remote corner, and an ordinary white-clothed young man sat there. The crowd didn't find 10 million high-grade divine stones strange. What was strange was that this person raised the price by 7 million high-grade divine stones. He raised the starting price of 3 million high-grade divine stones to 10 million high-grade divine stones. Of course, the uproar only lasted for a short while before someone began to bid. However, after the price of the 8 trigrams divining yang water rose to 10 million high-grade divine stones, the sounds of bidding became much quieter. Although the 8 trigrams divining yang water was a relatively rare level 9 divine medicine, the price of 10 million high-grade divine stones was already the limit. If he increased the price any further, it would undoubtedly be a loss. 20 million high-grade divine stones. Amidst the sparse sounds of bidding, the white-clothed youth once again raised the price to the height of 20 million high-grade divine stones. In an instant, the surroundings were as silent as ice. Many people looked at the white-clothed youth with unfriendly gazes. They felt that this white-clothed youth was causing trouble. The auctioneer, on the other hand, was pleasantly surprised. He looked around to see if anyone was going to raise the price. Seeing that no one was paying attention to him, he could only knock the gavel in disappointment. After winning the bid for the 8 trigrams yang water, Yuan heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. He knew that the price he had paid had already exceeded the actual value of the 8 trigrams yang water. However, the 8 trigrams yang water was the key to Moyan of Wushang's recovery. He didn't want anything to go wrong. Moreover, with Zhuowen's current wealth, a mere 20 million high-grade divine stones was truly a drop in the ocean. Not long after, a beautiful female cultivator carried a tray and handed it to Zhuon. Zhuon completely ignored the female cultivator who was secretly throwing flirtatious glances at him. After he finished the transaction of the 20 million high-grade divine stone, he kept the 8 trigrams divining water into his spirit ring. "Brother Crepe Myrtle, I've got what I want. I don't plan to stay here any longer. I'll take my leave first," Zhuon said to Crepe Myrtle Star Monarch. Crepe Myrtle Star asked in surprise, "Brother Zhuo, don't you plan to find Patriarch Mountain River, Su Liang?" Zhuon waved his hand and said, "I still have some urgent matters to attend to. It won't be too late to come back to the mountain and river hall after I'm done." The Crepe Myrtle Star Monarch nodded and said, "I'll go with you. There's nothing here that I want. It's boring to stay here." Zhuon nodded and left with Lan Ji and Purple Star Sovereign. There were quite a few cultivators who got up and left halfway, and the mountain river hall would not stop this. After all, others had already bought what they wanted. It was understandable that they did not want to stay here. The mountain and river hall had no reason to force people to stay. However, just as Zhuon and Crepe Myrtle Star Sovereign were about to leave, Su Liang, who was sitting cross-legged below the high platform, suddenly opened his eyes and laughed. "Fellow Taoist Crepe Myrtle, why are you in such a hurry to leave? Don't you want to catch up with your old friend?" As soon as Su Liang said this, the originally lively auction immediately quieted down. Everyone's eyes gathered on Crepe Myrtle Star Sovereign. They did not expect that Su Liang would ask this person to stay. Could it be that this person was special? Crepe Myrtle Star Sovereign frowned at Su Liang and cupped his fists. "It's not convenient today. I'll definitely pay you a visit another day." Su Liang laughed and said, "There's no need for another day. Let's do it today." As he spoke, Su Liang suddenly stretched out his right hand. A wave of extreme fire energy condensed into a giant hand that could burn the heavens and extinguish the sun. It grabbed at Crepe Myrtle Star Sovereign. For a moment, the square was in chaos. Many cultivators sitting on the praying mats stayed far away from Crepe Myrtle Star Sovereign and Zhuowen, watching this scene in shock and bewilderment. They obviously could not figure out why Su Liang suddenly attacked. However, there were also some clear-minded people who thought of something. Their eyes lit up as they looked at Crepe Myrtle Star Sovereign with blazing eyes. Crepe Myrtle Star Sovereign's eyes darkened. He also stretched out his right hand. However, he used the fusion of extreme fire, extreme lightning, and extreme wind energy. Clearly, he was using his full strength. Boom! A muffled thunderous sound resounded. Immediately after, Crepe Myrtle Star Sovereign let out a muffled groan and retreated dozens of steps. He looked at Su Liang, who was slowly walking over, with fear in his eyes. Myrtle Star Monarch's heart sank. He never expected the gap between him and Su Liang to be so great. They were both at the level of 3 extreme, but Su Liang had only used the power of extreme fire to force him back despite him using all his strength. Zhuon looked at Su Liang with interest. The power of Su Liang's attack just now was very impressive. If it was his original body, he could also take it head-on. However, Su Liang clearly did not use his full strength. According to Zhuowen's estimation, Su Liang's strength was far stronger than ordinary life and death extremes. He was probably comparable to the peak of the life and death extremes and was transforming towards the half-step Heavenly Tao Master. Fellow Taoist Su, what is the meaning of this? Crepe Myrtle Star Sovereign had just stabilized his body and was slightly angry. Su Yangqi came behind Su Liang and looked at Crepe Myrtle Star Sovereign curiously. Crepe Myrtle Star Sovereign had used the power of 3 extremes. He did not see wrongly. He did not expect that there would be a second person besides the Mountain River Hall's patriarch who had also cultivated 3 extremes. The many powerhouses in the square who were participating in the auction were not ignorant. They had seen Crepe Myrtle's star sovereign use the power of three extremes clearly and knew that he was also an expert in the realm of three extremes. Su Liang did not look at Zhuowen at all. Instead, he stared at Crepe Myrtle's star sovereign and said indifferently, "Fellow Taoist Crepe Myrtle, have you forgotten what I said back then? I welcome you to come find me again and exchange what you need." Crepe Myrtle's star sovereign smiled bitterly and said, "Fellow Taoist Su, I think you have misunderstood. The flame parasite you mentioned is not with me. Moreover, with my strength, it is impossible for me to snatch it from old man Heifu." Su Liang frowned slightly and said indifferently, "There are only two people who came out of boundless Taishu. You and this brother here, and you are in the realm of three extremes. Only you can snatch the flame parasite from old man Heifu." Everyone looked at Crepe Myrtle's star sovereign in surprise. They had not expected this ordinary-looking purple-robed man to be able to snatch the flame parasite from old man Heifu. Moreover, they had heard that old man Heifu and the 10 great halls he led had all died in boundless Taishu. Could it be that this person had done it alone? Crepe Myrtle's star sovereign glanced at Zhuowen and saw the latter nod. Crepe Myrtle's star sovereign understood what Zhuowen meant. He pointed at Zhuowen and said, "The one who really snatched the flame parasite is this brother beside me. If you want to trade, you can find him." Chapter 2581. Ridicule. Su Liang raised his eyebrows as his gaze finally landed on the young man in white who had been ignored by him all this while. He had not expected that the burning bug he wanted would actually be on this young man in white with an ordinary aura. Furthermore, Purple Star Lord did not seem to be lying. It was obvious that this young man in white was the one who had obtained the burning bug. Everyone in the square was in an uproar as they looked at the white-clothed young man. Their gazes were filled with passion and greed. They had only heard of the burning bug and did not even know what it was used for. However, they knew that the 100 halls of the Taiching immortal realm had mobilized a large force to seal off the boundless Taishu because of the burning bug. The famous old man Heifu had even joined forces with the elites of the 10 halls in order to obtain the burning bug. Now that Ancestor Mountain River had come forward to trade for the burning bug, anyone who was not a fool would know that this so-called burning bug was definitely not ordinary. Furthermore, the aura of this young man in white was extremely ordinary. This made many cultivators rather disdainful of him, as they thought that this young man in white was simply guilty of possessing a treasure. Although many cultivators were secretly scheming in their hearts, they also knew that their schemes were useless, as Su Liang had already beaten them to it. No one present dared to snatch something from Su Liang, as that was simply courting death. "How should I address you, little brother?" Su Liang came back to his senses and smiled as he spoke rather politely. However, his tone was unquestionable and cold. Yun glanced at Su Liang indifferently and said, "So it's Brother Zhua." Su Liang laughed heartily. However, Su Yangqi's eyes flickered behind Su Ling. He felt that Zhuowen's name was somewhat familiar, but he could not recall it at the moment. It was not just Su Yangqi. Many cultivators present who heard Zhuowen's introduction also felt that the name Zhuowen was very familiar, as if they had heard of it before. "I wonder if Brother Purple Star Lord is telling the truth?" Su Liang asked with a smile. "Are you talking about the burning bug?" Zhuowen replied flatly. Su Liang was still smiling, but his eyes were cold. Clearly, he was very dissatisfied with Zhuowen's obvious question. "Brother Purple Star Lord is right. The burning bug is indeed on me," Zhuowen said flatly. Su Liang's face was even brighter as he continued, "Brother Zhua, you should know what I mean. Since you have the burning bug, I would like to make a deal with you. As long as I can do it, I will, and I." As soon as Su Liang said this, the surrounding cultivators were in an uproar. Su Liang was publicly recognized as an expert second only to the Grand Pure One in the Grand Pure One immortal realm. To be able to obtain a favor from such an expert was unattainable for many cultivators. Zhuowen glanced at Su Liang indifferently and said, "Favor? How much can your favor be worth? I'm not interested." The smile on Su Liang's face suddenly became much colder. Many cultivators looked at Zhuowen as if they were looking at an idiot. So Brother Zhuo is looking down on Su Liang? Su Liang's voice gradually turned cold, bringing with it a murderous aura. Su Yangqi, who was standing behind him, took a step forward and the surrounding cultivators from the Mountain River Hall surrounded them, sealing off all paths of retreat for Zhuo Wen and Star Monarch Crepe Myrtle. This person really doesn't know what's good for him. He actually dares to not give face to the Mountain River ancestor in the territory of the Mountain River Hall. It seems that he is courting death. He's just an arrogant person. He only has a sharp tongue. If we really fight later, I'm afraid this guy will immediately kneel and beg for mercy. I've seen many people like this. They just want to save face. The cultivators sitting on the futons all stood up and retreated to the periphery of the square. Now that the 100 Hall auction was over, they naturally couldn't sit on the futons anymore. Furthermore, the Mountain River Hall was already in conflict with Zhuo Wen. If they were to really fight later, wouldn't they be implicated if they continued to sit there? Su Yangqi looked coldly at Zhuo Wen and said, "Brother, our Mountain River Hall's ancestor hasn't come out for a long time. This time, he came out only for the burning worm. I hope you can fulfill his wish. The Mountain River Hall will be very grateful." Zhuo Wen laughed coldly in his heart. Now that Su Yangqi had said something like that, he didn't even want to make a deal. It was obvious that he wanted Zhuo Wen to hand over the Zhurong Gu for free. This Mountain River Hall was really not a good place. Didn't your ancestors say that he wanted to make a deal with me? What? You don't want to talk about the deal? Zhuo Wen said indifferently. Su Yangqi smiled disdainfully and said, "Our ancestor is willing to talk to you and do you a favor. It's your great fortune, but you don't appreciate it. Now you want to continue the deal. Do you think there is such a good thing? Who do you think you are? You just refused, and now you want to continue the deal?" Purple Star Monarch looked coldly at Su Liang and said, "Brother Su, what do you mean? Do you want to fight?" Su Liang clasped his hands behind his back and shook his head. "Brother Ziwei, this Su has always valued harmony, but this friend of yours seems to be a little young and impetuous, speaking so presumptuously. Do you think that I, Su Liang, am an old man who is easy to bully?" Speaking of this, Su Liang rubbed his right hand and said indifferently, "How about this? I won't pursue the matter for Brother Purple Star's sake. Hand over the burning worm, and I promise to let the two of you leave the mountain safely." Purple Star Monarch's eyes turned cold and he said indifferently, "Brother Su, I wasn't admitting defeat. I was just advising you. You are about to provoke someone you can't afford to provoke. Don't regret it when the time comes." Lan Ji was hiding behind Purple Star Monarch at this moment. He was so scared that he didn't dare to say a word. Although he knew that Zhuo Wen was powerful, Su Liang was not an ordinary person. In front of such a famous supermaster, Lan Ji was instinctively afraid. Su Liang was stunned and then laughed as if he had seen a very funny joke. He then pointed at Purple Star Monarch and said, "Brother Purple Star, are you talking about yourself? I admit that you were able to reach the 3 extreme realms. But if I'm not wrong, you reached the 3 extreme realms less than 100 years ago, right? You don't even know the path after the 3 extreme realms, and your accumulation is not enough. You say you are someone I can't afford to provoke?" Chapter 2582. Reverend Suyang had reached the 3 extremes tens of thousands of years ago. Even without the follow-up cultivation method, Su Liang's strength was definitely much stronger than ordinary life and death extremes after so many years of accumulation. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been called the number 1 person below the Grand Pure One. Crepe Myrtle Star looked on coldly and said indifferently, "I think Brother Su has misunderstood. The person I'm talking about is not me, but the person beside me." Crepe Myrtle Star's words were like a stone thrown into water, causing countless splashes. The expressions of the surrounding people stiffened, and the mocking laughter became even louder and more presumptuous. Su Liang also glanced at Zhuo Wen indifferently and continued, "Brother Crepe Myrtle, I won't joke with you. If you don't hand over that thing, you won't be able to walk out of the Mountain River Hall." Crepe Myrtle Star stopped talking and looked at Zhuo Wen. At this moment, Zhuo Wen slowly opened his mouth and said, "Today, your Mountain River Hall can't trap us. Su Liang, If you kneel down and apologize to us solemnly and give us the cultivation method of the 3 extremes, I might not attack your mountain river hall. Otherwise, your mountain river hall will cease to exist today. Zhuowen's words only attracted more ridicule. Su Liang shook his head, and his expression was already impatient. Su Yangqi noticed the impatience on Su Liang's face and immediately understood tacitly. He took a step forward and fiercely blasted out a fist toward Zhuowen. The power of this punch was extremely terrifying. It was enough to injure any life enlightenment cultivator. With Zhuowen's invisible body, it seemed to everyone that it was impossible for him to take Su Yangqi's punch. Unfortunately, the moment Su Yangqi's punch landed in front of Zhuowen only slowly stretched out his palm and easily grabbed Su Yangqi's fist. It was as if Su Yangqi's punch was weak and powerless. It looked impressive but was useless. Then, the crowd saw Zhuowen gently twist his right hand. A terrifying bone-cracking sound was heard, and Su Yangqi's right fist was directly twisted off. Su Yangqi wanted to retreat, but unfortunately, Zhuowen's right foot was much faster than his reaction. He kicked Su Yangqi's chest, which actually dented Su Yangqi's sternum and shattered all his internal organs. Rumble. When Su Yangqi fell to the ground in a sorry state, everyone finally reacted. Everyone stared blankly at Su Yangqi, who was struggling on the ground. Although Su Yangqi looked like he had only suffered superficial wounds, in fact, when Zhuowen threw out that punch, he had also destroyed more than half of Su Yangqi's soul. If Su Yangqi wanted to recover without hundreds or thousands of years of cultivation, it would be very difficult to repair the damaged divine soul. Su Liang was the first to react. He looked at Zhuowen solemnly and said, "It seems that I have underestimated you. You are actually a cultivator in the death enlightenment state." When Zhuowen attacked just now, others might not have noticed it, but Su Liang had noticed the mysterious death divine energy that erupted from Zhuowen. Although it was only a trace, Su Liang was not an ordinary cultivator. He immediately recognized the fluctuation of the mysterious death divine energy. The surrounding cultivators' gazes also turned solemn. They did not expect that this ordinary-looking young man in white was actually a powerful cultivator in the death enlightenment state. Other than Su Liang, there was probably no one present who was a match for this young man in white. However, even if you are in the death enlightenment state, you won't be able to walk out of the Mountain River Hall today. Since you dared to hit the Mountain River Hall master, you should be aware of the consequences. As soon as Su Liang said that, a terrifying killing intent spread out and froze the entire surrounding space. Feeling the terrifying killing intent, the surrounding spectators felt a chill in their hearts and could not help but retreat a little more. Many of them cast pitiful gazes at Zhuowen and Star Monarch Ziwei. Although Zhuowen had beaten Su Yangqi to the ground with one move, Su Liang was not Su Yangqi. He was the Mountain River Hall's patriarch. His strength was extremely terrifying, and he had once defeated an expert in the life and death enlightenment state. No matter how strong Zhuowen was, how could he be stronger than Su Liang? "Brother Purple Star, you should also step back a little," Zhuowen said to Crepe Myrtle behind him. Purple Star Sovereign nodded and kept retreating with Lan Ji, who was trembling in fear. When they retreated to the edge of the square, he looked at the 2 people who were still standing in the square. In fact, Star Monarch Crepe Myrtle was not confident either. Although he knew that Zhuowen was very strong, Su Liang was not an ordinary cultivator. He was a true expert. He did not know what Zhuowen's chances of winning were. "A mere death enlightenment state cultivator dares to face me directly. Your courage is not bad, but sometimes, the more courageous a person is, the faster they will die. You belong to this kind of person." Su Liang's calm voice slowly rang out. His entire body turned into a shadow and disappeared on the spot. Boom! Zhuowen stomped his right foot and moved dozens of meters to the side. Then, a terrifying huge pit appeared where he was originally standing. Countless gravel splattered everywhere. A figure stood brazenly within the enormous pit. It was Su Liang. At this moment, Su Liang's entire body was covered in black flames. The temperature of the black flames was extremely terrifying. It gave people the illusion that it could burn anything. Jun was no stranger to the black flames because it was the energy of the extreme fire. Chapter 2583. Instant defeat. He never thought that in front of such a powerful Su Liang, Jun would actually have the upper hand. However, the Purple Star Sovereign also knew that Su Liang had not used his full strength. After all, Su Liang had only used the extreme fire energy. Good boy, you really hid your strength well. You actually have such a powerful physical body. Su Liang stabilized his body. The contempt in his eyes completely disappeared. Just as he finished speaking, his gaze fell on Jun, only to discover that Jun was no longer there. Old fart, you talk a lot? But very quickly, a clear and cold voice sounded in Su Liang's ears. He cursed in his heart and fiercely punched to the left. Unfortunately, the instant he punched out, a fist had already heavily smashed into his face. Poochie! Su Liang spat out a mouthful of blood, mixed with several blood-stained teeth. Then, his entire body involuntarily flew backwards, heavily smashing into the ground not far away. At this moment, the entire place was silent. Everyone looked at Jun with a completely different gaze. Even Su Liang was so easily defeated. Just who was this person? This old man wants you dead. Su Liang, who had fallen to the side, let out an explosive roar. His entire body erupted with the 3 types of extreme energy: extreme fire, extreme thunder, and extreme wind. Like an enraged wild beast, he rushed towards Jun. The current Su Liang, regardless of whether it was speed or strength, was much more terrifying than before. Bang! Jun was not to be outdone. With his current body that had been soaked in the true dragon's blood, he was not afraid of Su Liang. Immediately, the two of them engaged in a great battle. They fought from the ground to the sky, and from the sky to the ground. The surrounding cultivators all dodged, not daring to stand near the battle between the two of them. This is the true strength of the mountain river ancestor. Look, that Jun is being suppressed by Su Liang. Although this Jun is hiding his strength, Su Liang is even more powerful and terrifying. If he truly angers Su Liang, then this person will truly be unlucky. Discussions continued as Myrtle Star Monarch's eyes were filled with worry. He had not expected Su Liang to be so strong after using his full strength. He had suppressed Jun. From the looks of it, Jun would be defeated in less than 100 rounds. And, do you really think you're a match for me? Su Liang's eyes were bloodshot as he looked disdainfully at Jun, who was still defending himself. Although Jun seemed to be at a disadvantage, his expression remained as indifferent as water. He silently looked at Su Liang and said, "Ignorant." As he spoke, Jun clenched his hands in the air. Immediately, boundless purple mist surged out. Afterwards, 2 extremely slender purple swords appeared in Jun's hands. Slash! Jun wielded the purple sword with both hands, looking like a god. His strength had actually increased by a lot in an instant. Boom! Su Liang let out a muffled groan as he was caught off guard and was blasted flying. His gaze was bewildered as he looked at the white-clothed youth who was surrounded by purple mist and held a purple sword in his hand. Dao intent? Who are you to Tai Ching? Su Liang's pupils constricted as he couldn't help but ask. The crowd below was also shocked. They didn't expect that the white-clothed youth would actually use the power of Dao intent. Purple mist. This is at least an 8th level Dao intent. Currently, in the Huaxia heavenly domain, there's no 4th person who can reach the 8th level Dao intent other than Honorable 3 Pure Ones. No, there's another person other than Honorable 3 Pure Ones. This person was Tai Ching's disciple back then. He relied on the power of Dao intent to destroy the entire Blood God Temple as a true god. Even the Blood God was injured. It's him. I remember that person's name is Jun, right? However, this person is also Jun. Could it be that he's really the legendary disciple that Honorable Tai Ching took in hundreds of years ago? Finally, someone among the crowd recalled the great event that had happened in the Tai Ching Immortal Realm hundreds of years ago that had shaken the entire Immortal Realm and even the heavenly domain. Although hundreds of years had passed and many people had almost forgotten about it, Now that someone had brought it up, everyone remembered. Wasn't the disciple that Tai Ching took in who destroyed the blood god temple back then Zhuan? His name was exactly the same as the white-clothed youth before them. This person is that Zhuan from hundreds of years ago? How is this possible? I heard that Zhuan was only at the true god realm back then, but now, he's actually already at the death realm? Heavens, this cultivation speed is too terrifying. An uproar broke out as all the cultivators looked at the figure that was still fighting with Su Liang in disbelief. Purple rain under the purple mist. Zhuan put the purple swords in his hands together, took a step forward, and slashed out. Instantly, the purple mist in the sky gathered together, and then a dense purple rain fell. The moment Zhuan slashed out with his purple sword, the purple rain gathered together and turned into sharp purple spirals that surrounded Su Liang from all directions. Su Liang's pupils shrank as the threat of death invaded his entire body. Then, he let out a roar and unleashed the power of level 3 in his body. Instantly, all the purple spirals that were attacking him were dispersed. However, the moment Su Liang dispersed the purple spirals, a purple light instantly streaked across the sky and pierced into Su Liang's chest. Su Liang spat out a mouthful of blood and was brought down by a huge force. In the end, he fell to the ground and was pinned to the ground by a purple sword. The purple mist dispersed, and the purple rain disappeared. A white figure slowly descended from the void and landed on Su Liang, who was pinned to the ground by the purple sword. His eyes were cold and emotionless. The mountain river ancestor was defeated? That's fast. All eyes were fixed on this scene. There was only a strange silence in the surroundings. Even the sound of a pin dropping could be heard. The cultivators of the mountain river hall quietly retreated. Even the mountain river ancestor was defeated. Wouldn't they be cannon fodder if they went over? It was basically impossible to kill an expert like Zhuan by relying on numbers. This was the common understanding of all cultivators. This was also the reason why a 9th heaven ascension expert had such a high status in the 8 heavens. Su Liang's eyes were still filled with shock and unwillingness. He did not expect that he would be defeated in the end, and in such a miserable manner. Su Liang, I could have killed you with this sword, but I didn't. Do you know why? Zhuan said indifferently as he stepped on Su Liang's chest. Although Su Liang wanted to struggle and resist, the purple sword pinned him to the ground and made it difficult for him to move. You want the cultivation method after the 3 extremities? Su Liang asked coldly. Zhuan's mouth was full of mockery. You don't have the cultivation method of the 3 extremities at all. Otherwise, your strength would be much higher. You would be at least a half-step Heavenly Tao Master or even comparable to a Heavenly Tao Master. However, I think you should know something about the 3 extremities that I don't. Tell me, and you'll suffer less pain. Su Liang's pupils constricted, but he quickly regained his composure and laughed loudly. Zhuan, you'll kill me whether I tell you or not. Do you think I'll tell you? Moreover, can you really kill me? You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.